Gentlemen, the time being 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order and declare it open. This is a council meeting including policy committee meetings, and it is our first for 2019. Back to all councillors for this, our first meeting. I'll be sending out a communique to you all tomorrow. I just sort of did a bit of a summary of during the year, all the hard work that you're all involved in, and a couple of comments at the end there, which I'll just say again for everyone. The most important thing is that we treat all of ourselves and the community with respect. Very, very difficult in a meeting, I know. We all have passions. We all have often different points of view. I think it's very, very important that we talk to the issue and not attack the person. It's pretty important we also show respect at all times. And I think that I'd also like to, just before we go into the proceedings, I'd like to pay, in the last week or so we've lost 3 good citizens of Orange that have put a lot of time in. That is Tony Fitzgerald and Leon Bowyer, Deputy Chief, over County Council and a long-time resident of Orange. Unfortunately, last night, Arthur Treweek and his wife Janet are probably known as major instigators way back with the farmers' markets and selling fruit in stalls and so forth. And unfortunately, they're not with us. So, look, I might just start off. I think it is very important because people have put a lot into Orange, and just have a minute's silence for those 3 people: Tony Fitzgerald, Leon Bowyer and Arthur Treweek. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. In the event of an emergency, the building may be evacuated. You will be required to vacate the building by the rear entrance and gather at the breezeway between the library and the art gallery buildings. This is Council's designated emergency muster point. Under no circumstances is anyone permitted to re-enter the building until the all clear has been given and the area deemed safe by an authorised personnel. In the event of an evacuation, a member of council staff will assist any member of the public with a disability to vacate the building. Apologies for absence. Councillor Whitten? No other? Someone move the apologies, please. Councillor Nugent, second. Councillor Duffy. All in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. Live streaming and recording. This council meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to be live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if and when you speak at this council meeting that you ensure you are respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Orange City Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. A recording will be made for administrative purposes and is available to all councillors. I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land. I would also like to pay my respect to the elders both past and present of the Wiradjuri nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians who are present. Does any councillor wish to declare any conflicts of interest in any matter for consideration at the council meeting this evening? Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In item 2.5, the Planning and Development Committee, the Byng Street Hotel, declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest as a member of the Regional Conservatorium. I ask that you conduct that.
Thanks, Councillor Turner. Councillor Miletto.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict of interest less than significant with regards to item 2.1, request for financial assistance. currently the president of the Orange District Football Association, and I notice that Waratah Sporting Club have asked for a grant to assist with getting Paul Wade here.
Thanks, Councillor Maletta. Any others? And you'll be notified when we come to those items anyhow. Late items. There's a late item in the 0.6 PDC. That's the independent assessment. Has everyone got a copy of that? Thank you. It was distributed. There are no mayoral minutes. Now the council. Oh, sorry, Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, look, I'll ask you to adjudicate on this because it is very relevant to the items that are in front of us: 2.2, 2.3, 2.6, and 6.6 enclosed. Mr. Mayor, I'd ask you, because of the large number of people that are here tonight, and with the items being, of course, the Centre and George, respective residents of George Wiley Place and other areas. Mr. Mayor, I would ask if you would consider allowing me to now move a motion of this item.
No, I think we'll just we'll cover them when we get to it down in planning and development, because the chair of that is Councillor Turner.
The only reason I ask that, Mr. Mayor, is because on the grounds of timing, I don't think residents nor councillors have had enough time. It's an extensive report. We've had 4 days to absorb this. I know a number of residents have approached me and asked me for a meeting on site. I'm happy to meet with them on site. I think they should be given that opportunity. I think councillors should have an on-site meeting. My intention was to move that we move this to the next council meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Well, when it comes into planning and development, try that. Okay.
Well, my only reason there, Mr. Mayor, is asking at this point in time is there's obviously a lot of people here.
I've made a rule, Councillor Taylor. I've made a rule. I've made a ruling on it.
Made a ruling.
Made the ruling, and we have a lot of the people that are here this evening have come out of their way to come here tonight because they're going to speak to us tonight about their concerns.
I'm happy about that, but the fact of the matter is, I think that they could maybe.
I've made a ruling.
Come back in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Now we have a list of speakers. Our first speaker is Don Harvey from 590 Burrendong Way, Orange, and his topic for discussion is the management of water sources for Spring Creek. Mr. Harvey. Our next speaker is Penny Dardoy from 113 Byng Street, Orange, and it's the Housing Plus application.
Thank you, Mr. Turner and councillors. My name is Penny Dordoy. My role is the Head of Community Services for Housing Plus. I've been employed with Housing Plus for 9 years, and one of my responsibilities over the duration of the 9 years is to lead our domestic and family violence services, and if approved, I will provide managerial oversight of the orchard. I'm going to cover 3 points. The 3 points are the need for a domestic and family violence centre in Orange, the solution, which is our solution, the orchard, and the impact on the neighbourhood as it pertains to perpetrators of domestic violence. First, the need. Orange has twice the state average of incidents of domestic violence, according to the ABS. Orange Police are called to over 800 domestic violence incidents every year in Orange. Orange has never had a domestic and family violence refuge. Many in the community have been calling for this for 30 years. Housing Plus has been fundraising and applying for grants for 2 years to make this a reality. Nearest refuges are in Bathurst and Forbes, both located in residential areas. Currently, women have to go to Bathurst, Forbes, Dubbo or further afield to find a refuge with an available bed. This means uprooting their children from school, moving away from family, friends, church, community and employment. Traditional refuges are generally communal living, and not everyone wants to live in or are suitable to live in that type of environment. And this can act as a deterrent to people leaving violent relationships. The orchard that we are proposing is completely different. So, point 2, our solution, the orchard. The orchard is what's known as a core and cluster model, and this model has been recommended by the Victorian Royal Commission as best practice model for women and children escaping domestic violence. In Victoria, all traditional refuges are moving to this model. The model consists of 6 fully self-contained units, a main admin building with 24-hour support, and a reach-in model where women can get all the support they need within the orchard until they feel confident enough to access that support outside. In 2018, I travelled to Victoria twice, visiting 2 operating and successful core and cluster centres, and we have modelled the orchard on these Victorian models. The orchard will be the first of its kind in New South Wales. Location is critical. It needs to be part of a residential area with connections to community, work and school, and to aid recovery from trauma and to provide safety and normality that will help women and children get back on their feet and not feel stigmatised. Point 3, managing perpetrators. Most perpetrators of domestic violence will be under an apprehended domestic violence order, known as ADVOs. And most perpetrators will be known to police. For the vast majority of perpetrators, ADVOs are effective in changing behaviour, as they face serious consequences if they breach that order. To deter perpetrators from attempting to contact their partners, we will provide immediate risk assessment and actions to protect victims, 24-hour experienced trained staff, education and training for victims on how to keep themselves and their children safe, including when using technology and social media, strict boundaries and rules to keep them, their children and others safe, appropriate fencing and landscaping that acts as a natural barrier, video cameras around the perimeter of the orchard, and whole of facility CCTV monitoring and recording. This is all in accordance with the recommendations of the New South Wales Police. Housing Plus works very closely with police to keep victims safe and hold perpetrators accountable. We undertake thorough risk assessment for every person we work with. Not all women and children will be suitable for the orchard, as they or their perpetrator might pose a risk to other residents staying there. In these cases, we will support them and find other options for them. Mr Turner and councillors, I am requesting you approve this much-needed facility to ensure the ongoing safety of the women and children fleeing domestic violence in Orange. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hardoy. The next speaker is Mr David Fisher. Housing Plus, re the Orchard.
Good evening, Mayor Kidd, councillors, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is David Fisher. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Housing Plus. One of my responsibilities is to raise awareness, funding, and eventually establish a domestic family violence centre in Orange. I'll be responsible for ensuring that, if approved, Housing Plus fully meets all of its obligations that you may attach to this planning proposal. Tonight I wanted to cover 3 important points. First is the selection and the suitability of this location and site, and the alternative sites that we considered. I'd also want to discuss the future use of the orchard and clarify Housing Plus's intentions for the use of the other blocks that are proposed as part of this subdivision. But before I do so, I would like to make an important point. Over the last 2 years, we have received an enormous amount of support from everybody across Orange. What we wouldn't want to see is the orchard dividing the community of Orange, but rather unite it. Housing Plus is a not-for-profit organisation. We provide a range of housing and community services. We've actually been providing domestic family violence services for over 14 years. We're recognised both in the state and across the country as one of the leading specialist service providers in this area. Some 3 years ago, Housing Plus, with the support of others, established the Orange Domestic Family Violence Roundtable to tackle the high levels of domestic violence in Orange. The Roundtable has in its membership our local member for Orange, Phil Donato, our federal member, Andrew G., as well as important representation from Orange City Council, New South Wales Police, and New South Wales Health. The Roundtable identified the need for a women's and children's domestic family violence centre as a key priority for the city. We have been working ever since towards securing the funding and support to help these victims. As I've just mentioned, we have been overwhelmed by the support that we have received. Unusually, we're receiving it from all levels of government, both federal, state and locally. Businesses across Orange as well as the wider community. To summarise, the proposal is for the better good of Orange. We'll be helping women and children for many, many years to come. The proposed standard of accommodation and its location will set the standard for domestic family violence centres in New South Wales for years to come. So turning now to the first point in terms of the site and its suitability. We selected the site and its location partly because there are very important reasons for women in deciding to leave an abusive relationship and start the road to recovery. If the property and location stigmatises them, or if they could not see themselves or their children living there, they will be deterred from leaving. They won't recover quickly. The impact will last longer for them and their children. A location was sought that was adjacent to or on the outskirts of a residential area, which provides both privacy to the existing neighbours as well as the residents of the orchard. Our own experience of managing properties in Orange, our research about the location of refugees and core and cluster centres in New South Wales and Victoria shows that families who are recovering from domestic violence do best when they recover in a residential neighbourhood. This is particularly important for children. Housing Plus commissioned a real estate agent to look at affordable and appropriate land options throughout Orange, where we could establish the orchard that met the planning guidelines. We believe that the vacant lot adjacent to George Wiley Place is an ideal location, and it's so for these reasons.
Mr. Fisher, I'll just have to see Councillor Mileto, second Councillor Munro. All in favour? Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
You've got a couple of minutes to finish off.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very new to this. We think the vacant lot adjacent to George Wiley Place is an ideal location for a number of reasons. I think the first thing is it will be largely unseen to existing residents. The new homes proposed within the subdivision will form a natural barrier between the existing properties and the orchard. These lots will be sold, as we understand it, to families who will move into these properties in the full knowledge that one of their neighbours is the orchard. Part of the subdivision, or the proposed subdivision, is the construction of a lane or road between these new properties and the orchard, again adding further distance between the existing properties of George Wiley Place and the orchard. The boundary fencing facing the northern distributor will be of a similar size and style to the existing rear fencing at George Wiley Place. We will, however, plant hedging along the perimeter to soften and improve its current appearance. It's also important to note that as this is a sloping site and the orchard will be located at the bottom of the site, some metres below the garden level of the existing George Wiley Place, it will add to the property being largely unseen. I think the second point, which in our opinion makes this lot ideal, is it's a safe and secure location. We sought advice from New South Wales Police, who approved the appropriateness of this location as being safe and secure. And finally, the lot itself provides enough space to provide individual private properties within a safe and secure landscape garden to the standards that we wish to achieve. So in all, it's an ideal location. We also believe that the construction of the orchard and the new properties as part of the subdivision will significantly improve the appearance of the current area. So everybody knows it's currently used for storing aggregates, road materials and trucks.
I have to wind you up there, Mr. Fisher, I'm afraid.
2 questions for the points. In terms of alternative uses, Housing Plus can guarantee that the orchard will continue to be used as a domestic family violence service, and have offered to put a restriction on the proposal for that purpose. In terms of alternative sites, we looked at many across the city. None are as suitable as this proposal. And finally, in terms of the other blocks, I can confirm Housing Plus has no intention of purchasing these blocks for social housing, as has been speculated by many people. Mayor and councillors, I'm requesting that you approve this much needed facility for the good of Orange, and consider, as part of your deliberations, how you'll improve the lives of women and children across our community for years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Fisher. Our next speaker is Justin Cantello, 113 Byng Street, Housing Plus.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Turner and councillors. Thanks for listening to me tonight. My name's Justin Cancello. I'm Director at Housing Plus. I'm responsible for development projects for Housing Plus. So tonight I just want to cover 3 areas, that being funding, timing of the DA, and also the consultation process that we went through. So in terms of the background and update on the funding, so it was back in October 2015 that we formed the Orange Domestic Violence Roundtable, which was directly in response to the high rates that Orange experiences of incidences related to domestic violence. What came out of that DV Roundtable, which made up of the 3 levels of government, local, state and federal, as well as many local not-for-profit organisations, to try and tackle this problem that we experience here in Orange. In October 2016, a year later, we carried out a community consultation. And then in May 2017, we developed the fundraising committee and developed a fundraising strategy specifically for the Domestic and Family Violence Centre. Following this, Housing Plus led many tenders, and it was in November 2017 through the Building Better Regions Fund that we raised $588,000, or not raised, we were awarded. Then through state government, we won the Core and Cluster funding, which was for $900,000, and that was June 18. And then soon after that, September 18, we signed the contracts for the Stronger Country Communities Fund. On top of that, we've raised $760,000 through community fundraising, through cash and in-kind donations. That totals $2.9 million, which is an amazing achievement for the Orange community for such an important and needed community facility. One thing that I really want to express and bring your attention to These three funds, particularly the Building Better Regions Fund, which was the first one that we won back in November 2017, are time critical. So there's certain milestones that we need to meet. The first milestone, for example, is that by March, we are to achieve development consent and to have awarded the contractor, and then the final milestone is to complete construction by the end of this year. So the grants and the milestones associated are time critical for us. Now, in terms of the timing of the DA, it has been raised why the DA was submitted when it was. So because we were awarded that last fund in September last year, that was when finally we had enough funding to proceed with the project. So that's when we started to compile the DA, which was submitted 2 to 3 months later. The DA which was submitted on the 6th of December. Now, the reason that we were under such pressure to put that DA in as soon as we could was again because of the milestones associated with the grants. So to achieve that milestone, which I'll remind you is to achieve consent in March and to award the contract, as well as complete the construction by the end of this year. So we really don't want to miss this opportunity that is here with us now through delay of progressing with consent and the project. In terms of the consultation process, we believe that we exceeded the requirements associated with the consultation. During the consultation, we sent one letter to the neighbours adjacent to the boundary of the site. We followed that up with a letter to all the residents within George Wiley Place. We released a media release through traditional media as well as social media, just to put out the right information from Housing Plus. We also provided pop-up stalls on 2 days, which we invited any community members to come in, talk to Housing Plus, talk to David Fisher. And beyond that, David Fisher, our CEO, also offered to meet with any resident.
I have to give an extension. Councillor Munro, Councillor Romano, just remind you, you've got 2 minutes, you better.
2 minutes, got it. Last point. And we'd also like to highlight that the advertising period was extended by Council by a week, which actually ended up meaning that the advertising period was 5 weeks, when the minimum requirement is only 2 weeks. So we believe that there has been sufficient. We've gone above and beyond in terms of the consultation. Thank you for listening to me tonight. We really think that this facility is critical, and we don't want this opportunity to be missed through delay. Thank you.
Mr. Cantello. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter Basher. Peter Basher, Planning and Development, re the orchard development. Mr. Basher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. My name is Peter Basher. I'm the Town Planning Consultant acting for Housing Plus on this particular project. I prepared the statement of environmental effects for the DA and worked closely with representatives of Housing Plus and other consultants to have this application brought before council. I don't intend to go through each and every issue as this has been done quite thoroughly in 3 separate assessments, being the statement of environmental effects that supported the DA, Council's own assessment report for the DA, and the independent assessment or the peer review report that was prepared by Keelan Consulting. All 3 assessments demonstrate that the proposal is worthy of approval and that there are no town planning reasons that would warrant a refusal. With reference to the 3 town planning assessments, it's enough to say that the proposal satisfies or addresses the key planning considerations, and in this regard I might just go to a few of them. Firstly, there is no question or doubt regarding the permissibility of the development. Council has the approval to approve this application pursuant to State Environmental Planning Policy for affordable rental housing and also via Orange Local Environmental Plan 2011. It is true that the development does not comply with the 50-metre setback from the NDR centreline. However, a few things need to be understood about this. Firstly, the 50-metre setback is encouraged by Council's Development Control Plan, or DCP. Now, a DCP is a guideline document and can be varied where good cause is demonstrated. In fact, the DCP states a merit-based or, and I quote, a merit-based or performance approach to residential development focuses on achieving planning outcomes rather than prescriptive or numerical, often minimum standards. In this plan, numerical standards are mainly used as a guide. Variations to these may be allowed where an application demonstrates to council's satisfaction that the design objectives and principles are achieved. End of quote. So in this case, good cause has been demonstrated. Council, in the various assessments, it has been agreed that the 50-metre setback is not required to maintain visual amenity along the NDR, and nor is it required to ameliorate noise impacts from the NDR. Just turning to traffic, the traffic issues have been addressed. The development, in conjunction with existing and future residential development, will cause traffic numbers along George Wiley Place to amount to some 344 vehicle movements per day, which does exceed Council's subdivision and development code by approximately 44 vehicles. However, Council's assessment report on the DA refers to other instances where this occurs around the city, citing exceedances much greater than this proposal, with one exceeding by 99 movements and another by some 480 movements. Despite that, Council has assessed that the traffic impacts will be satisfactory in this case because vehicle movements will be spread throughout the day. That's the first point. Secondly, George Wiley Place represents a low density traffic environment. And thirdly, the nearest intersections to serve the development are of adequate capacity. Now, in addition to Council's assessment, we would also refer to the RT Guide to Traffic Generating Development. Table 4.6 of that guide suggests that a residential street with a 50-kilometre speed limit would have acceptable environmental capacity with a maximum peak hour volume of 300 vehicles per hour. As indicated above, the predicted traffic for George Wiley Place is 344 vehicle movements per day. So the traffic numbers as a result of this development are very well within the environmental capacity that's encouraged by the RTA for residential streets. And finally, the draft consent contains relevant conditions that would address many of the key issues, particularly in regard to the operation of the facility. For example, condition 48 restricts the use to the accommodation of domestic violent victims. Any other use of this facility as a group home would be subject to a separate application and assessment. So that really reinforces Housing Plus's position that they would guarantee that this facility will be just used for the purposes of domestic violence. And then condition 51 applies various measures to ensure the safety and security of the facility, including CCTV, strategic lighting, access controls and the like. Such measures are proposed anyway, but they're also reinforced by the condition. As you've heard, representatives of Housing Plus are here tonight and they have further explained the operation and its management, and hopefully it further allays concerns in this regard. Thank you, councillors, for your time.
Mr Basham. Our next speaker is Mr Paul Cox from 9 Nandillion Drive. Housing Plus Orange. Thanks, Mr Cox.
Thank you, Mr Kidd, Mr Mayor and fellow councillors. Thank you for the time to speak to you tonight. My name is Paul Cox, as you've heard, and I'm a long-term resident of Orange, 40 years this year actually, and so I'm almost a local. I was involved in the real estate industry in Orange since 1986. I am and have been a community representative on the Community Safety Precinct Committee with the New South Wales Police since its inception, which is well over 15 years. I'm also chairman of the Roundabout Central West, a community-based organisation which aims to improve the lives of the citizens of Orange and the Central West. I'm here tonight to illustrate to you, the councillors of our wonderful city, the insurmountable amount of community support that has been forthcoming in recognising the need and the benefits of the establishment of a women's domestic violence refuge in Orange. I have here with me a list of all the community organisations and business owners, mostly local, some from further afield, but nevertheless all willing contributors who, along with their employees and many individual residents of the City of Orange, totalling well over 200, have supported the establishment of the Orchard Refuge. I'm happy to leave the list with you, Mr. Turner or Mr. Mayor, and we have copies available if any councillors would wish to have one. I'd like to take just a minute to name some of the supporters of the Orchard. Not going to go through all of them. Some who no doubt many of the councillors here present tonight may recognise, such as our community groups of the City of Orange, including the Australia Day Committee and the Australia Day Community Committee, the Orange Debutant Ball Committee, Orange Inner Wheel Mini, Orange Uniting Church Men's Fellowship, Quota International, who I add, whose ideals include the provision of basic needs to women and children, the Rotary Clubs of Orange and Orange Daybreak, to name just a few. As I said, I won't name all of them because there's over 200, but suffice to say that support from our community-based organisations has been absolutely tremendous. One of the many very well supported fundraisers for the Women's Domestic Violence Refuge has been the Shot of Support, which has run now over 2 years with over 60 of the local coffee shops in Orange contributing to the refuge. So again, a very good indication of support for the refuge. The White Tie Ball, which perhaps some of you were at, which was run for the second consecutive year in 2018, was yet another very successful community-backed gala event which saw 260 guests attend the Orange Ex-Services Club, and this raised in the vicinity of $40,000 this year in 2018. And that had the support of over 130 businesses, names which are included in the list I referred to earlier. Many of the schools in Orange have also fundraised for the Domestic Violence Centre, so the students have helped out realising the need for this facility. The New South Wales Police have also been involved right throughout the planning process and are in support of the Orchard, which will provide them with a facility within Orange for alternate accommodation for the victims of domestic violence, an opportunity they have not had previously. I would like to add that in 2018, this council conducted a poll across the community of Orange in order to understand which projects the community felt should be on top of the list of the council's major projects and funding requests. The result was an overwhelming indication from the community that the Women's Domestic Violence Centre should be placed number one. This led to a successful Stronger Country Community Fund in the order of $680,000, which was the key and allowed for the commencement of the development application process and construction planning. Mr. Mayor and councillors, all of the businesses, their employees, the community groups outlined previously, as well as an overwhelming majority of the residents of the City of Orange, who number into the thousands, have supported the construction of the Women's Domestic Violence Centre and are now waiting to see this council approve the construction of this much-needed facility in Orange. All eyes will be on the decision and the outcome of tonight's meeting. Some will be tuned in on the live broadcast as we speak and are awaiting the decision to hopefully approve this unfortunate but necessary inclusion to the assets of the City of Orange. The approval of this development application tonight will undoubtedly show once again that we as a community do care about the welfare of our citizens, and in particular the women and children who are looking to escape a violent situation. The Orchard facility will provide the first step in building for themselves a new life without domestic violence. On behalf of the vast majority of community of Orange who have shown their support through their involvement in the many and various fundraisers and events, I would ask for your support and approval of this facility. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Our next speaker is Julian Potts, 10 Pioneer Place, Orange. And it's Housing Plus, the Community Fundraising Committee. Ms. Mutz.
Hello, Mr. Kidd. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. And in the interest of full disclosure and openness, I'd like to let you all know that I am very proud to be the chairperson of the Crisis Centre Community Fundraising Committee, and in my full-time role that I work, I work with Western New South Wales Local Health District as a senior sexual assault worker, but I'm not here representing the health service tonight. I'm speaking as a long-term resident of Orange, as I've lived here most of my life. So throughout my career of providing counselling and support for women and children who have experienced violence, there are many stories that I could describe to you of the intense fear, intimidation and soul-destroying things they have experienced. These women and children are from every economic background. Just because they have money and resources doesn't mean they will have access to that money and resources if they leave a violent relationship. As family violence will commonly include financial control, social isolation, coercive control, which is every move they make is scrutinised, abuse but not often obvious, and sexual abuse. We live in a rural community, and over the years I've seen women who have been a farmer's wife, and when they left the violent property home, they've had nothing in their name, no resources, no supports, and feeling they had no future. So strong to make that decision to grab their kids and flee for their own safety and the safety of their children. Almost biological impact of on the growth and brain development of children subjected to and witnessing family violence is well recognised, and it changes a child's brain. Psychological impact can never truly be measured, but all professionals and survivors agree that it is a lifelong and extreme for every part of the person's life, including future relationships, whether they are intimate relationships or the extended relationships such as work and social relationships. So over the years, I've had the pleasure of working with many strong and resilient victims of violence, but they don't get to be strong automatically after being a victim of violent crimes. The people who access services are usually desperately looking for someone to help, someone to show some humanity and kindness, and above all, safety, to enable them to begin the road to regaining their strength, their sense of who they are, as this is all torn away from them when they are victims of personal violence. I'm hoping that in 2019 the majority of people recognise the devastating impact of domestic and family violence. And I feel really confident that Orange is increasingly recognising violence against women and children as a huge issue and no longer an issue that is a private matter for families to deal with, hidden behind closed doors, which was highlighted by hundreds of people, men, women and children, who braved the freezing conditions last year to do a peaceful walk and demonstration in Orange on White Ribbon Day. So we've never had a safe, purpose-built crisis centre for women and children in Orange. And because of this, women who are desperate to find safety have had to take their children and leave Orange, leave any supports they might have in Orange and their employment. The kids have to leave their school, their friends, their supports, which can be so difficult that the woman might consider returning to the violent situation, as it is just too difficult to try to re-establish a life for her and her children away from their community and connections they may have. In these situations, if the woman returns to the violent situation with her children, abuse will commonly escalate with devastating and often irreversible effects. So 40 years ago, I myself needed a refuge. I had to flee a violent marriage with my baby on my hip, $2 in my pocket and not even a change of clothes. I had to leave my home, leave this town. I was escorted out of town, and I was actually housed at the refuge in Bathurst, and I had a single bed, and my son and I slept in that single bed because that's what you got. Didn't matter if you had 4 kids, you had one single bed. So, but it was a place of safety. It didn't matter. Those doors were locked and I was safe and nobody knew where I was.
Councillors?
Yep.
Councillor Munro, Councillor Romano, all in favour? Thank you.
Almost finished. So what a woman needs to escape a violent situation is a safe place for her and her children. Safe and time to heal, space and time to heal, to regain her strength, her sense of identity, and to be supported by caring professionals who know how to assist her to rebuild a life free of violence for her and her children. The Crisis Centre will offer all these things. It will be a safe place, offering safe accommodation, counselling, support and advocacy with service providers to assist with every part of their journey to a happier and safer life. Centre will be culturally appropriate and accessible for all people, including women and children with disabilities. This will be a centre that Orange can be proud of and will be seen as the best in the state. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Kath Logan, 49 National Avenue, re the Orchard. Thanks, Ms Logan.
Good evening, councillors and executive. My name's Kath Logan. I live in National Avenue and I'm here to say that I'd be perfectly happy to have the orchard next door. I also have family living in Ploughman's Hill Estate. As a community member, I'm extremely disappointed at the fears that have been whipped up about women and children who have suffered domestic violence. I've read the DA and the independent review and I believe that both show compliance with planning law, and also disappointed to observe that a lot of objections indicate that people haven't read those documents. So I believe that transport to the CBD, traffic volumes, lighting, parking and security are covered and they're more than adequate. Concerns about perpetrators attending the centre to hunt down their former partners are unfounded because most perpetrators who have driven their partners into such a dire situation are under ADVOs and are unlikely to go to a place where there is video surveillance that will give a record of their offending. Concerns about parolees being housed in the centre, a clear implication that women who are on parole deserve less protection from domestic violence. All of us have contact with people who are on parole in the community, we just don't know it. Concerns about the centre being near children are similarly illogical. There'll be children living at the centre and I don't see how they can disaffect other children. So my support is based on having lived near the LC Refuge in Glebe for a couple of years. I've also lived near halfway houses and houses for people with disability. So LC Refuge brought to our neighbourhood people who are really grateful to be there and they were having a red hot go at having a good life. The police were very responsive to anything that happened in the area and there was no downside and Glebe property prices continued to climb. So I believe that this will be a great asset to our community. As a community, we have a duty to protect people who are in need. Many of the women who will be using this centre, as the last speaker said, will come from neighbourhoods very similar to Ploughman's Estate. And I ask you to please approve the application.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Alex Irwin from 2 George Wiley Place, the Orchard Development. Thanks, Mr. Irwin.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, executive, everyone else. My name is Alex Irwin. I live at 2 George Wiley Place. I'm speaking in objection to the two DAs before council in their current form. Yes, I'd like to make it clear that my objection and the objection, I'm sure, of most of the others in George Wiley Place and Ploughman's Hill is not an objection to a domestic violence or domestic and family violence facility. It's to the location of that particular facility in our neighbourhood. I guess I'm sure the councils are all on top of this, but we're not here to debate whether or not Orange needs a domestic and family violence facility. We're here to actually consider whether the DA in front of you actually is appropriate in terms of its location. I made a rather detailed submission, which I'm sure the councillors have read, and I'll try not to go into too much detail and reiterate that sort of information. A couple of points, just listening to some of the speakers from Housing Plus, and whilst I don't deny what they're saying in terms of the need, a couple of points which have left me a little frustrated. reference to the consultation has been over and above what would be considered reasonable in this situation, I think is not correct. I'd take objection to that. 5 residences received a letter in September, and then the letter referred to was from council notifying us that the development application was going in over Christmas. Housing Plus have referenced that they have to speed this thing through because their funding will run out. I happen to be married to someone who assesses these for the Commonwealth Department, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying that there is plenty of opportunities for the funding to be varied, and I'm sure that in a case such as this, which has such huge implications and positive implications, that would be the case. So I don't believe that the funding should be a reason for the council to push this through if they have any doubts regarding some of the content. I guess I'll just go to a couple of points and I'll try to be quick, and I'm sure I'll be wound up if I'm talking too long. One of our primary concerns, and I think it's been reiterated in a number of submissions, is the issue of traffic. I'm strongly of the belief the traffic impact assessment that was done is flawed and inadequate for the purpose of assessing this particular application. The town planning consultant who's based both the number of vehicles which use George Wiley Place and those which would be used by the facility on a series of assumptions. I can't see any reason why the council couldn't have actually put down traffic counters, for instance, to actually understand exactly how much traffic there was. I can't understand why Housing Plus couldn't have provided actual numbers to the consultant in terms of how many vehicle movements would be used. Further to that, in council's own assessment report, they referenced the fact that the number of vehicle movements, which I believe to be underestimating the number which will actually use that street, exceed the subdivision and development code. In the assessment report, it's referenced that there's several other cul-de-sac developments as justification for going over this. It's my understanding that the code was applied or adopted by council in 1997. Those two cul-de-sac developments which are referenced were approved in 1992 and 1994 respectively. So to justify not complying with the code based on developments which were approved before the code, I think is a little disingenuous and should be taken into account. The traffic assessment, I think, fails to consider the safety hazards which are associated with the intersection location, as well as with the pedestrian traffic and the foot traffic which uses that. I'm of the personal belief, and I'm sure there's others here who are the same, that there is alternate access points to this development if it is to proceed, which would be far more appropriate and would reduce and remove a lot of the potential impacts on George Wiley Place and surrounds. In relation to the issue of safety, it's been mentioned a number of times that there will be there'll be various measures put in place to secure the facility based on the CPD tier, the crime prevention through environmental design. My big issue, I suppose, and the big issue that we've got is that these are all aimed at securing the facility. We have a legitimate concern that despite ADVOs being in place, that there is the potential for perpetrators to end up in our neighbourhood. And I don't believe that this concern is unwarranted, and I don't believe that it has been appropriately considered. My family has personal experience where my stepdaughter had an ADVO out against someone, her former partner. And
So ask for an extension for you. Move Councillor Munro, second to Councillor Prevatera. All in favour? Aye. Against. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So look, I'll be brief. And she was attacked there was an ADVO out. She was in what was deemed to be secure housing, and she was attacked, and an innocent bystander was also injured. So, the evidence would suggest that ADVOs aren't the ultra secure measure which they're made out to be. My big concern, and I'll be very brief on this, I apologise, is the social impact assessment conducted for the purpose of this was solely based on the fact that a facility was required. There was no attempt to consult with us as the other stakeholders or potentially affected stakeholders, and it seems to be that because the facility is needed, that the concerns and the values and the interests of other people who might be affected can be disregarded. I would argue that a more complete social impact assessment, which properly consults with those who are affected, ought to be completed. Look, I appreciate I'm going over time, so I'll skip through everything else. As I stated before, personally, and I'm sure I speak for others in the George Wiley Place area, we are not opposed to the development of a facility such as the Orchard. If the location as chosen is deemed to be the most appropriate, then we are willing to accept that. However, I think that it is incumbent on the council to consider an alternate form of access point to the development, because it would take away the traffic hazard, it would take away some of the social concerns we have, it would take away some of the security concerns we have. It would also improve and maintain the amenity of our neighbourhood. I would also argue that the residential blocks which form part of the subdivision which border George Wiley Place, whilst there's obviously economic gain to be made there by the council, in terms of the operation of the orchard are unnecessary, and I think converting these to green space or community land would not impact on the overall objectives of the orchard, would go a long way to appeasing some of the concerns that we have as local residents, and would also provide what I would suggest to be an improved amenity both for the orchard and for the residents of George Wiley Place. Look, I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr.
And
Owen.
I hope you take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Our next speaker is Craig Geyer from 32 George Wiley Place, re the Orchard Development. Thanks, Mr. Geyer.
Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors, my name is Craig Geyer. I live at 32 George Wiley Place. The proposed development will potentially back onto my property. Major concern, first I'd like to say that I'm not opposed to a domestic violence crisis centre, and I'm opposed to its location and its effects that it will have around it. The first point I'd like to make was that the communication and consultation with us as local residents has been extremely minimal. I was first notified by a letter from Housing Plus on dated the 30th of October. From that, it said, basically we're going to do this, would like to talk to you, and so on. We're lodging a DA. That was the extent of the consultation that I have had. George Wiley Place is actually a very unique cul-de-sac in that we have a lot of pedestrian activity so on through the George Wiley Place, because it's a major connection down through to the wetlands. What I would be concerned about would be the generation of the additional traffic and so on through there would actually make it unsafe for people to walk there with their prams and walk their dogs and kids and that. The street is always full of kids on bikes playing and so on right out the front of my house. And it's part of the reason why my wife and I decided to originally purchase the land and then to build our biggest investment of our life, our dream home there. So, and we love the fact that we have all of these kids out the front playing, being happy, so on, and I would hate to see that the kids would feel threatened by the excess traffic and so on, or parents even going, oh look, don't get out the front because it's not overly safe for you to do so anymore. Catch up to where I'm at. And in saying that, like, George Wiley Place isn't just utilised by the kids of George Wiley Place. We have a lot of kids that come around from all around through Ploughman's Hill through there, because it's a connection through to the wetlands, and they connect through to the park that's just up off Road in Valencia, and they come through, and it's a really great communal place to be. My other concern is that with the safety of us residents, with this type of facility, I am concerned that, you know, there will be the potential for a perpetrator to seek out their victim, not get into the facility, and then just, for a better term, snap their carrot and take it out on the people around in the local community. I'm also concerned about, being that this will be deemed as a group home transitional, and that even though there will be an underwriting in the documents to say that it will be deemed for the use of a domestic violence crisis centre, the opportunity to change that use from that to something else under the description of a crisis centre will need a modification to a DA. I can appreciate that. But will it actually result in any sort of consultation with the community, being that, you know, from the onset, there was only the residents that were given a letter that actually back onto those lots of the residential subdivision, and from that was the initial. That's as far as we're going to start our consultation. And then after the Flowerman's Valley group got together and started generating the understanding of this DA going forward, that it then Housing Plus started to communicate with people who are further up George Wiley Place and so on.
To call for an extension again. Councillor Munro, Councillor Prevatera.
Housing Plus talk about a roadway separating the proposed development from the houses backing onto George Wiley Place. It's clearly under the subdivision plan that this is actually, the laneway, as mentioned, is actually a piece of private land that will be owned by the furthest lot along, and there'll be a right of carriageway over that land. So it's not a roadway and it is not a lane. Such to in terms of their comment regarding that. Sorry, it is a bit hard for me to speak up here, and I do appreciate that you guys are giving me the time. The other thing in question too that I just sort of picked up on was in the approval document for the subdivision plan, there is a walkway that runs when you first come into George Wiley Place on the 90 group, and there's a walkway that goes between two residents and down, and that's actually for stormwater drainage and so on. That's a concrete path. It's fenced as a pathway to give access through there out into the open space. In the documents there that it says it's going to close off that walkway. So does that actually mean then that walkway is just fenced at the front? We have a 4 metre wide strip running between those houses, and that's just become no man's land and a potential hiding place for whatever. Again, guys, I'd like to thank you all for your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Robert Wharton from 2 Valencia Drive, Orange, and it's re the orchard development.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you for your time. I know that our group is unjustly branded as insensitive, lack compassion. This is entirely untrue. We're not a group of, excuse the pun, Reg, what do you call your silver tails? We're just a group of concerned residents unsure of the unknown. And I think everybody here tonight is aware that our group is in full support of the building of a suitable facility to house victims of domestic violence. But we also support the appropriate position of the facility that supports the requirements of the residents using these facilities. The The proposed area has no immediate service for the residents, and it appears, without sounding caustic, to have been chosen as an easy way out of utilising an unused area with very little thought of how it affects that area before looking for a more suitable area. The area to the north of Orange has the North Orange shopping facilities. It has a Woolworths for groceries, fuel, a preschool, McDonald's, a play area, the botanical gardens, a proposed medical centre, and it is now a newly developed area, which, maybe should be given consideration because there's a lot of area there still undeveloped and still in that area. This would be, to us, a more appropriate area, and we'd appreciate your consideration of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Horton. Our next speaker is Trevor Hain from 18 Jonathan Road, Orange, and it's re the orchard development.
Mayor and councillors, most of the topics that I want to talk about have already been brought up one way or another. I'm a member of the Ploughman's Hill Community Group, and we have always said that we agree that we do need a facility. It's where the facility is being played. I believe that's going to take some time to work out if you had to change your mind, and we've come up with a lot of correspondence to the council. A lot of that has not been answered. One thing that's coming up at the moment to me is what happens to the $1.6 million that was given in the second tier funding to the council. If we don't pass, or if you don't pass the DV facility tonight, does that mean that you lose that money? Or do we have a plan B where we can reapply for that money? I can see some puzzled looks around the place. There was some second tier funding where the council was awarded $1.6 million. So everyone know what I'm talking about, Reg?
I certainly know that council weren't given that funding. I think you'll find that funding went to Housing Plus.
Right.
And the answer to that question would come from, and it was addressed earlier by Mr. Cantello. That's been disputed by one of the speakers, and reasonable to say, but that's the answer to that. Can I just say every submission that's come into by a councillor is gone, and it's in that folder there.
Now, is there a plan B?
What?
Have we got a plan B if we don't choose George Wiley Place?
I don't think that's relevant to a DA.
Okay then. We've already been speaking about the domestic violence statistics. We've got the lowest per capita police force anywhere in Australia. That came over the news just recently. How can the police attend to the potential problems that will certainly exist even outside the compound from the perpetrators? Housing Plus have said that the problem would not be great as the perpetrators would be incarcerated or have an AVO against them. That is rubbish. Why do we need to have a compound if there's no problem? Why do we need 2.5 metre fencing? Why do we even need to take people out of their environment? Why can't they stay in their own homes if the perpetrator's locked up or as an AVO? And just on that 2.5 metre fencing, I think that's inappropriate to the area anyhow. We're not allowed to have 2.5 metre fences around our houses, and I don't think it should be allowed in this area either, and it shouldn't be required. The police are on full throttle at the moment, and they are requested to attend. They're going to prioritise. We may have people endangered. That's not only people inside the compound, it's all the residents and all the residents' property. somebody could prove me wrong on that, I'd be very happy. Just a little side note here that we sort of feel like Alex does, that this decision has probably been pretty close to being made. We've put in some crim-safe doors in preparation. That was one of the reasons I could not attend to the pop-up box. Installer for the crim-safe doors is looking for someone to install doors for him. He reckons business will boom. Okay, now as far as the Bloomfield and single housing, we believe that the single housing scenario, it works. We've got it in our area now. I mean, we have problems. We've had to call the police on occasions, and they do attend. And as far as Bloomfield, I think it's ideal because you've got all the facilities there except for shopping. You've got all your medical requirements, all your counselling requirements are already there, so why duplicate them? Housing Plus has said that I've received a letter from...
I'll just have to ask for an extension. Councillor Munro, Councillor Tara, all in favour? Thank you.
Housing Plus provided a response last night to me, just at the last minute, and they said the selection criteria, George Wiley Place, was a location that was not isolated, would be safe and secure. A location endorsed by the New South Wales Police as safe and secure, a quiet residential area where women and children will have dignity and feel safe. A location that does not have an institutional setting. And I reckon that's why we bought our places where we did. But that's going to be, and we want to preserve it, of course, but I believe this compound is going to change all of that. The Housing Plus said they considered Bloomfield, and I'm wondering whether that was just a drive-by. Once again, I'd like to say that single dwellings are very acceptable to our community. The last thing, which has been spoken about as well, was that Housing Plus can initially promise that it's only for the DV victims, but there's no real protection in the... They only have to change their name and be considered another sort of facility. And if they decide they're going to take other offenders in there, are they going to be forced to tell us? Are they going to tell the council, or do they tell the local residents? But no. I believe that, because this whole thing looks as though it's a signed and sealed deal, but the true victims in the whole thing, the way it's been organised, is really the residents of the Ploughman Hill group. In closing, I'd like to hope that wisdom and conscience will play a big part in the final decision that's made today. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, two to go, is, I hope I say this properly, Air Toth? Get that correct.
Hello, I'm Eva Toth, and I'm the lady who lives in 11 George Valleys, and I'm living exactly opposite to the road what you're trying to build, and I object to it immensely. First of all, I'm not objecting to housing blocks because I'm one of those ladies who's actually raised a lot of money for them, and but the location of the road, I'm objecting for safety reason and traffic reason, and my objection is because first of all, I bought the place because it was a cul-de-sac, and Ellen, the first gentleman, and every other gentlemen have addressed all the issues what I actually read a lot on the council website, and I don't want to get into any other reasons, because my reason is a lot of it is emotional and safety. But I understand the other reasons too, and the traffic, specifically because my house is exactly on the bend, and the bend is so sharp when you go into that road, and when you actually coming towards George Valley Place back, my house is going to be the lights are going to be shining on my place all the time at evenings, and whenever the police or whatever comes. And my concern is basically, I listened to everything what Housing Plus was saying, and I'm not against them, but my concern is they are going to have all the safety facilities for them. But what safety facilities going to have for the residents who are there? Because that is really important for us too. And especially because I'm living on my own, and I'm going to be short and sweet. I don't mind the actual what they wanted to do, but I object to the actual location of the road.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Final speaker, Laurie and Gins, 5 George Wiley Place, Ruby Orchard Development.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Bear with me, this is very nerve-wracking. I'm not used to public speaking, so I appreciate your kindness and patience tonight. Firstly, I'd like to say I and my neighbours, I'm objecting to the proposal. And myself and my neighbours support everything that has been presented tonight on behalf of the individuals and the bodies supporting this proposal. In fact, we feel just as strongly and just as passionately, because as Alex Irwin mentioned earlier, many of us have been impacted by the issues of domestic violence, either directly or indirectly within our own families. So we support everything that has been presented tonight in its fullest extent. However, what has been absent, as you might have seen in all the presentations for the proposal tonight, is any consideration towards the people that are being impacted by this proposal and how it will affect our lives, our quality of life, our families and our activities. That has been noticeably absent. If we talk about supporting our community and caring about everybody, that has been entirely absent. I'd just like to respond to the idea that was put forward, or it was presented as fact, that consultation has been carried out in a proper way, and that I'd like to say that has not occurred. The residents in George Wiley, first contact and notification we received was a mailbox drop to our homes, and they were actually the 2 development documents. That was on the 17th of December. So, but they were the documents. That was no consultation. And the first attempts at consultation occurred around about 2 weeks ago, when we were notified by Housing Plus that a pop-up consultation provision would occur here at the council chambers. So I can honestly say from myself, my home, my family and my neighbours, that absolutely no consultation occurred in any form whatsoever. I'd just like to quickly move on to, I've got 3 points: security, access, security and traffic. But I might address security first because I'd like to respond to a comment that was raised earlier that it is unfounded that a domestic violence perpetrator would come and cause any disruption or threat to our street and our neighbourhood. That was actually stated earlier in one of the conversations. I'd like to draw your attention to the incidents at Brisbane Airport this Sunday, the 3rd of February. One of the largest Australian airports in Australia went into lockdown. Indeed, it brought a whole city to a stop. And that was regarding a domestic violence incident where there was an arsenal of security. And, well, I don't need to tell you what our Australian airports are like and the facilities and provisions in those places for security and protection. So I'd just like to quote from a news article sorry, bear with me. So I'm actually going to be quoting the Assistant Commissioner, Peter Crawford, and his comments to the media on Sunday. He said, quote, sorry, bear with me. Quote, unquote, the perpetrator, what he was saying and his actions were certainly terrifying. Assistant Commissioner Crawford praised the officers who responded to the incident, along with the members of the Australian Federal Police and Airport Security that all attended. He said, obviously, the work by all the agencies was exceptional, but I think this is a poignant point. He says, quote unquote, the police officers who were dealing with the situation in close proximity and across the airport showed a great deal of bravery. So I just want to convey the enormity of that.
Ms. Jenny, I'll just have to get an extension. Munro, Councillor Prevotaro, all in favour, I should say.
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Can I please appeal to your sense of reason and just comprehend the enormity of that? So potentially that's what we're facing in our street. I mean, look what it did to one of Australia's largest airports and cities. And indeed, with the level of protection and security in that scenario. And the perpetrator arrived right in the middle of it all. So I'd like to put that forward in addressing comments that protection orders and due measure will protect the people in our street and our area. Moving forward, I'd just like to address the issue of access. I'd like to support Alex Irwin's comments, and indeed this support comes from my neighbours and the residents in my area, is that we implore you to please consider creating an alternate access to the facility, either off the distributor or the escort way. That would certainly ease many of the concerns and issues affecting us in the present situation. And just with regard traffic, and I'd also like to raise this point to, yet again, in terms of how our community has been spoken about, both generally and in the media, is that we have a number of group homes in our area, indeed in our street. Those development applications were passed with no objection from any of us in our area. We have all actively supported those homes and interacted with the citizens that use those homes with love and support and kindness. There are many examples, and if we had more time, and we don't tonight, I'd be happy to share those with you, because it has been a very rewarding experience for us to have that in our community. That also just does lead on to my next point with traffic,
Christine,
though.
you'll have to make this very quick.
Okay, that's
you're well
okay.
over now.
Sorry, I appreciate that. Is that there is at any given time up to 10 vehicles in front of the home in our street, and that does create more traffic. But we still feel that there hasn't been enough serious consideration to the frequency of traffic and the volume of traffic that will significantly change the aspects of our street. Just like to thank you for your time so much, and I wish to acknowledge everyone that's spoken here tonight, and I understand that every side of our discussion on this matter is difficult, and I'd like to thank everybody for the time that they've given tonight. And just to leave one thought with you is that the difference is tonight when I go home, my community and my home and my family are as they are, and we're safe and everything's okay. If past this, that's all going to change. And I just want to leave you with that thought, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gin. Look, that concludes the open forum, and can I just thank everyone that's presented tonight. It's been a bit longer than we would normally have. I think it's a very, very important issue that we're all facing. I thank all the speakers for showing due respect to the other speakers, councillors. So once again, we move on to the council meeting resumes now. I move on to 3.1, and that's confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Orange City Council held on the 8th of December. Moved Councillor Munro, seconded Councillor Nugent. All in favour? Against? The council meeting now adjourns for the conduct of the policy committees, with the first being Planning and Development Policy Committee. Councillor Turner, thank you.
Mayor, would you conduct 2.5 first? And if the agreement of the council.
Right. Just move over to 2.5. Let me get... page 717. Development application DA 329/201553, Hotel 62 Bing Street and 77 Hill Street.
Recommendation.
Move the recommendation, Councillor Nugent, seconded Councillor McRae. Councillor Mileto.
What page are we on? Sorry.
717.
717, item 2.5. The recommendation is on 720.
Checking to see whether this referred to all three items. I had an issue with the fence, that was all.
Wardell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, there are 4 items here under consideration, including the makeup of the fence.
I don't support the recommendation. I support the first 2 regarding the windows, but I'd like an update with regards to the fence. Could from you, please, Director Waddell, where we're at with that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Mileto, this modification seeks to ask of Council whether a fence could be made from not hardwood, so pine in this case. The staff recommendation is that you stick with hardwood. There is a request to adjust the louver screens on the west facing into the property next door, which staff have agreed to or are recommending you approve. There's a condition about windows on the western side, which were to be originally fixed but are now windable and open, and staff have looked at that in detail, particularly with regard to noise impact, and are recommending an approval. And there's a minor change to a balustrade. So they're the 4 items under consideration. But the staff recommendation, clarify for you, is that the hardwood remain as if you vote for the recommendation.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll move the motion. All in favour, the recommendation, I should say. Ends for this one, thanks. Against? Thanks very much. Could someone call Councillor Turner back in to...
Have clarification of that vote.
Yeah, it was unanimous.
I just noticed hands still up while I was against.
No, it was unanimous and I counted them.
I've got questions here from someone looking, Mr Mayor.
I just answered your question, Councillor Duffy. It was unanimous.
Chairman, Mr Chairman, I'm
That's
sorry.
enough. Thanks,
I'm
Mr
just
Turner.
But I asked the question, the staff are asking the question too.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will officially open the Planning and Development Committee for the 5th of February. The only declaration of interest was one myself, which I declared. 2.1 is items approved under delegated authority of council.
The recommendation.
Been moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Prevatira. Any comments? All those in favour? Carried. Point 2, and I will note that 2.2 is for the application for the subdivision, nothing to do with the development of the hostel. Do I have...
Chairman, if I
yes,
may.
Mr. Councillor Taylor.
Mr Chairman, I'll again ask Council to defer items 2.2, 2.3, 2.6 and 6.6 enclosed, as all items are pertaining to the violence facility and all are relevant. Put that motion to Council. Get a seconder?
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Taylor's motion?
Yes, Mr Chairman.
Councillor Duffy, proceed, Councillor Taylor.
Mr Chairman.
Well, no, we've got a seconder. No, you're right. Sorry.
Mr Chairman.
Continue.
Mr Chairman, as we've heard tonight in great detail, we've heard both sides of the story as far as this issue is concerned. It's a vitally important issue, and I think of all the speakers, I think the final speaker in her closing comments summed it up. That will affect people's lives. It will affect their amenity. It will affect their neighbourhood. It will affect, they believe, their safety and security. So what we need to do here is we need to take all these points into consideration before we make a final decision. Now, Mr Chairman, nobody, and I think I speak with confidence, nobody in this particular room does not support a domestic violence facility for this. Much needed and much overdue. The fact of the matter is that there are a number of residents who have repeatedly said here tonight the lack of consultation has really disturbed them over this issue. It disturbs me that it was put up over Christmas, and we can talk about 5-week exhibition periods or 2-week exhibition periods or whatever it may be, but over that period I don't believe that is fair and equitable as far as the people of that residential area are concerned. So I believe that council should be very considered as far as making a final decision here. This is a planning matter. It's about location. It's about the suitability. It's about the suitability of it being in a residential area. About the effects that it will have on traffic, on security, on access for those residents, particularly in George Wiley. Now, I think council can defer this matter for 2 weeks. It will enable council to meet with the affected residents, to get a more succinct view on Housing Plus's side of this. And I think it's something that's vitally needed. I think if we rush into this tonight and make a final decision on this tonight without taking into account the effect on these people's lives, I think we're certainly erring as far as this issue is concerned. So I would certainly ask that councillors take that into effect. Mr Chairman, councillors around this table that are making this decision, people may not be aware of it, have had 4 days to consider these lengthy documents. 4 days, that's all we've had. And there's a number of submissions there. I've read the reports and so forth, but I can't say that I've read all the submissions and considered all the points that have been raised by the concerned residents. I'd like a little bit more time to do that. I'd like to meet with the residents on site and I'd like to have a look at alternatives. It was presented to us tonight, Chairman, that some of the residents have said the major concern is access. They know that the facility itself will affect the amenity of their neighbourhood, but they said the major issue is the access there. Maybe it sits at the moment, I can't support development. But maybe if there is some sort of compromise as far as the access off the Northern Distributor. Now, the first thing I know that council will come back with, planning staff will come back with to say, there is no access off the Northern Distributor. Well, have a look at Bunnings. Have a look at that. I've been on this council and I was instrumental in helping get the funding for that original Northern Distributor. And one of the golden rules was there was to be no direct assets. I tried to get an amendment to the plans of the North Orange McDonald's so that it would be laid out similar to the Blackstone McDonald's, where they'd be able to come out of the McDonald's on the red lights. No, because there's no egress or access off the Northern Distributor. Well, the Bunnings precedent is there. So that's convinced me that we may need to go back if we have to look at this George Wiley option. I myself have major concerns over its suitability in a residential area. I support 110% a facility for Orange as far as domestic violence, but I really have some major concerns and I want to hear what the people up in that area have to say, and I want to assess it and I want to have a good look at it. Now, whether other councillors in this room share that, I'm not sure. But I'm certainly hopeful that you will give it 2 weeks, because as was indicated to us very clearly here tonight, this will affect people's lives. It will affect, some people have concerns that it affects the value of their properties. They're major issues. And as a number of people have pointed out tonight, the reason they moved into the area was because it was a cul-de-sac and it's a secure residential area. So we need to take all that on board before we actually vote on this. Need of a domestic violence facility in Orange does not negate the rights of the citizens and the residents up in that area. Put forward their concerns to their elected council. I'm asking that the deferral of those items and all associated items, including, as you've pointed out, Mr. Chairman, the approval for the subdivision there, I would like those deferred for 2 weeks. And I have concerns about the location with the Northern Distributor, the 50-metre buffer. Because I'm sure if there was any other type of development going through, I'm sure that we would not have. Please, councillors, 2 weeks, let's have a look at it, let's go back, let's talk to the residents, let's talk again to Housing Plus, see if there are any solutions to the current site or if there are alternate sites. I don't want to have to go through the whole process of an alternate site. I know that would delay this whole process for a significant amount of time. But really, there are people's lives and here to be considered, and we need to take that very much into account. This will affect people's lives. I think that, for the sake of 2 weeks, make a considered, constructive decision and be confident that you've made the right decision.
Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. I absolutely agree with Councillor Taylor's statement that this will impact on people's lives. And I think a 2-week delay to the delivery of a domestic violence centre may unfortunately be we lose lives. We always have the same length of time to read the papers for these meetings. We have had public forums, had workshops and briefings as councillors. We have had site visits, both I actually attended with council staff on Friday as part of the regular pre-development meeting invitation that's extended to all councillors, and I believe there are actually a number of tours held on that day before work and at lunchtime. Not all councillors can attend, I understand that. We've had a number of emails throughout most of January regarding this matter, and I know that I have read them and I have reflected on them and I have asked staff questions. The 2 weeks that matters is in delaying support for women and children who need a safe place. I do not have any confidence that in 2 weeks we will be able to materially change the fabric of what is in front of us tonight. which is a development which appears to be allowable. Of course, we would debate that if the matters are put forward. But what will change if we have 2 weeks off? What will change in terms of the suitability? We can make a vote tonight and people know where they stand. I don't believe that changing access would be allowable and possible within a 2-week period to come up with a design and a plan that we can approve. And in terms of Councillor Taylor's comment about the values of properties, Councillor Whitten regularly reminds me that property values are not relevant to a planning decision. And sadly, that is the case in the case of this residential development, but it's also the case in terms of what is the value of a life. Those who are needing the support, who are under duress and in the most extreme circumstances seeking a safe place of refuge. We have to take tough decisions here, and the last speaker spoke about bravery. We need to make a decision tonight, be brave, stand up. Having gone through the normal DA process, sorry, it wasn't a normal DA process because it had a 5-week exhibition period, but we have had the same amount of time to consider this matter as any other matter of planning and development. I think the decision should be made tonight. Speak against the deferral.
Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I actually, Councillor McRae's right in all the correspondence. I've only spoken to the residents and I've only heard from the residents that are complaining about the proposed development in the last couple of days, maybe 3 days. I'm hearing that nobody's against this, and 100% I think we all agree that this has got to happen. But I'm also hearing in a strong way that if the proposed new road leading in from George Wiley Place is removed, as Councillor Taylor said, we look at the Northern Distributor Road as an entrance and exit, or we look at Escort Way. A lot of people will be satisfied with that. I've had a lot of discussions with there. People are nodding heads now. They will be satisfied with that. Nobody's against this proposal. It's wonderful. But I personally disagree with the entrance where it is now. It's a quiet cul-de-sac. They've bought their property in that cul-de-sac. All of a sudden, it's going to be bombarded with... As far as safety, I don't think you're going to have a problem with safety. It's not a jail. It's not going to have dogs and spotlights and people with guns. It's simply what it is. It's just somewhere for people to go to. So I would be supporting possible a deferral, try and sort out the entrance and exit to this property, because I believe that's all that the problem is.
Councillor Munro.
Deliberated on it very strongly. I'm the advocate for the domestic violence refuge. By heart, I have a lot of domestic violence myself as a child, and through aunties and uncles and things that happen. And so that's, I suppose, the way I feel. But look, I also understand the people, the residents in that cul-de-sac. As was said, the cul-de-sac is a place of play to be community, have Christmas get-togethers, all that, and it'd be great to be able to include the centre as well. But I do see council here has the opportunity. It's not locked in. We can rewrite the lines on the development. We can, I think, council staff's knowledge, give us the tools to approve this development tonight with an egress and access off Escort Way. Can we tonight approve this subject to approval from the RMS or whoever to be able to put a road access off Escort Way? Can we do that? I think that would give clarification, give some substance to Housing Plus. Let's say that they've got a subject to this. Put pressure on RMS as well, in regards to having a built in a timely manner. I think we could do that. And this new council, new 12 months, I think we've all said to ourselves we're going to get things done this year. Let's get things done. Let's push them through. Can I have that? Could anyone in staff tell me, can that be done, or do we have to defer it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just on the question of whether you could do that tonight, my answer would be no, you can't. There's no certainty. It's a planning term. We need, if the deferral is asking us to look at a different access, we need time for design. Mr. Greenham does. We need time to talk to the RMS. Correct? 2 weeks. If a road access is involved, it won't be 2 weeks. It'll be 4 weeks or more. I just want to make that clear. You can do a site visit within the 2-week motion, no problem at all. But the road design will require subdivision redesign. It's not going to be a quick process, and I would say you can't do that tonight, just from the floor.
All right. Well,
we need to work.
Sorry.
If I may, through the chair, just elaborate a little further. Escort Way would not be considered as an access point. We had some issues trying to get just driveways off on Escort Way, that close to the proposed future roundabout. So on that basis, if you were to consider an alternate access, the only one available would be the Northern Distributor Road, and that would still need some issues to be sorted out because of the location, proximity to the proposed roundabout.
So what time period do you think this could be turned around so we could give Housing Plus a definitive answer and residents?
Might need to consider re-exhibition.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, we would also have to re-exhibit it for 2 weeks because it's a substantial change.
A good 3 months at least.
I would think we'd need 2 months at least.
Okay. Sessions, how do we get around, if we do approve this tonight, for mine, it's so important that this facility happens, and we've heard all the discussion from our residents, heard our discussion from Housing Plus, and we all have a heartfelt reasons why we want to have this as soon as possible. In regards to the security, the fence height, like the fence height I understand can be 1800 as opposed to 2.5 or whatever it was. There can be amendments made to the way the facility has got cover from vegetation. We can try and put more vegetation.
Councillor Munro, may I remind you that you're now into the debate on the development, not for the...
Yep. Okay. I'd just like to try and encourage councillors to have a view of residents' concerns, ways that we might be able to not impact those concerns so much, and be able to bring a better result for both parties. I do agree with the concept of the how do we think very strongly about how we amend a few of the concerns.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I'll be speaking against the deferment. I think the major concerns from the residents have all been put in front of us, and there's probably 4 or 5 main ones. So we all know where they're coming from. So I think that information's been brought forward not only through the papers but through emails we've received. I think it's here and now we make a decision. We don't want the residents hanging on for another 2 weeks in case it does go the wrong way for them, giving them false hope. I think the information's there, so let's get to it and make a decision.
Any other speakers? Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support, as I said before, the deferment. Look, let's be reality here. 3 if a consigned rescission motion is deferred automatically. But we have had issues here before. There's more issues here than just at the. I think everyone in Australia supports the domestic violence there, but there's more issues at hand here. Is there going to be enough room left for a roundabout there? It's going to be there. And I don't want the director to say, yes, there is going to be, because I was given that answer up at North Orange when we had the debate on the lights up there. They said there was going to be plenty of room up there. Well, sorry, there's not. I drive a service vehicle and I go up over the edges of the things. I nearly wipe out lights. So I want to know and I want to understand what happens. And does that mean that the distributor road is going to come down Ploughman's Lane now? Is that, remember what happened a few years ago where the place was full up at Wentworth Golf Club? Does that mean that was happening? Why not give ourselves some time to address all the issues? The issue of crime and safety and everything like that, and access, site selection even. I don't know what other sites looked at. And I want to address the issue of what we're talking about, the time frame of our business papers. I got an email on Friday afternoon at 1:20 saying my business paper was in my pigeonhole. I'm on a bus travelling around town, finished at 6 o'clock. Can't get into the place over the weekend. I'm in Dubbo at 5 a.m. on the Monday morning, and I come and get. No, I'm telling you, addressing the issue because I'm deferring because I haven't had time to read all these things here. And that's one of my points. I want to make an informed decision in this place here. There's a lot of things here just get pushed over and we move forward. Sorry, I want time to have a look at it, and that is why I'm supporting the rescission, the deferment motion. It's as simple as that. I want to make an informed decision. I'm not going to go against the domestic violence thing. I'm not going to vote for it because I haven't made up my mind as to what I want to actually do, and I haven't had the relevant information in front of me, and I haven't been receiving emails by my iPad because I've only just got a new one. I haven't had time to look at them. So I don't think so. There's a lot of other things there as regards to the communication thing really worries me from the residents. That really worries me. We've gone through a process, but I'm also really worried about how we got the land and how much we're going to make out of it. How much money are we going to make out of the whole sale of this land?
Again, stick to the issue with Councillor Duffy about
I'll
the
just
deferral.
sort of throw it in there just to let where it is. As I said, I'm supporting the deferment. I want some more answers.
Look, I can't support deferment. I think we have the information in front of us. There has been discussions about this going a long period of time. Got a council and a senior staff member that have been part of that round table. They've reported back to council. We've had briefing sessions in this chamber. Now, coming into Christmas, yeah, it's not the ideal for anyone, but I can tell you what, there's lots of DAs going through and there's a number of reasons, but it was extended twice, 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and then to 5 weeks. Then there was the pop-up shops or whatever you want to call it put on here, a notification of it, and I can guarantee you that I have read every single one of those because I received them as emails and I responded to everyone and I read through them. I also spent another 3 hours today.
Excuse me, please.
And I also read through these again this afternoon. If there was someone I didn't respond to individually, I apologise for that. It seems that I've missed 1 or 2 people. But I think the information is there. It's not going to make it any easier to make a decision. And I think deferment is only just putting something back that we're going to have to make a decision on.
Thank you. Okay, there's Councillor Nugent.
Yes, I just want to speak against deferment as well, just very briefly. I think the points that have been made by Councillor McRae, Councillor Hamling and the Mayor are very important points. A 2-week deferment I don't think is going to achieve very much, except just delay things, delay us getting on and building this very important facility, which does need to be built. And it's great that we've got common ground. I think everyone in the room, everyone in Orange agrees that we do need such a facility. A lot of work has gone into the location, and what we need to consider is this sort of development permissible in this particular location. Heard from Housing Plus that that this location is the ideal location in Orange. It is state-of-the-art design. It's based on allowing people going through extreme trauma to live in the community and not be isolated in a institutionalised setting. And I do find people talking about it as a compound fairly, not particularly pleasant way to refer to this development. So, look, I don't see that a 2-week deferment, based on the advice from staff, is going to achieve very much in that time frame. If we were to defer it and look at an alternative access, we're talking about much longer delay in building what is a critical facility.
Thank you. There's no further discussion. Everyone understands what right of reply?
Right of reply, Mr Chairman.
Keep it brief, Councillor Taylor.
We're asking for 2 weeks. We're asking for 2 weeks to talk to the residents to try and, I don't know if we can address their concerns. I don't know if we can find a way that we can get that access there. I don't know whether we can address their concerns about safety. I heard councillors in this room only a few weeks ago when we were debating the toilet for Robertson Park. So they changed their vote because of safety concerns. That's a public park. This is a residential area. They've got safety concerns. Now, give us 2 weeks just to be able to get all the issues clarified. Let's see if we can find some sort of common ground on this. Maybe there is no common ground on it, but the concerns I've heard from the residents are enough to cast doubt in my mind if this is a suitable site. This debate is not about whether we need a domestic violence facility in the City of Orange. Yes, we do. That's unequivocal. That is not up for argument. But we are going to affect people's lives with this decision tonight, and we need to be confident we are making a decision with all the facts put in front of us. Councillor Duffy has indicated the problems that he's had accessing his papers and reading everything. He's not comfortable to make a succinct decision. That should be respected. We're talking 2 weeks. And might I remind you, I mean, the fact of the matter is that if this goes through tonight and a rescission motion is placed, I don't know whether one will be put in place. You've got a 2-week deferment anyway. So I would plead to councillors 2 weeks. Talk to the residents, talk to the people affected, take on board what they say, then make an informed decision in 2 weeks. It's only 2 weeks. It's not the end of the world, and at least we'll be able to say we made an informed decision that we believe was in the best interest of the entire community.
Finalise this debate.
I just want to ask a question of the General Manager, if it's okay, Mr.
Councillor Duffy.
Take the money, you can keep the job.
General Manager, would you be of mind of writing to whoever you need to write to as a matter of urgency, see if we can push a laneway out to Escort Way to alleviate this issue? I think a man of your standing and contacts in politics and the rest of it should be able to have an input there, as well as other senior councillors here, Russell Turner, in regards to talking to the relevant people at 2 weeks to try and get some clarification on yes or no. This is an important issue. It's an important facility.
What's your question, Councillor
So
Munro?
I would like to ask the General Manager if he would be kind enough to do that for us councillors in the community. We'll put the weight of all this on the General Manager.
Wish to respond, Mr. G.
Staff already covered off on the framework. I could write that letter. Ending that, framework would still have to go through sorting designs and all that. That's going to have to be the pathway.
Write the letter.
I'll write the letter. Yep, fine.
Write the letter, and with due diligence, get it back as quick as possible.
Okay, we will now put the motion from Councillor Taylor. Everyone understand that it's all the items that he mentioned be deferred for 2 weeks. All those in favour? 2, 3, 4. Those against? 7 to 4, the motion is lost. We go on to 2.2, development applications for the subdivision George Wiley Place and lot 125 Escort Way. It's been moved, Kidd, and seconded by, you seconded, Councillor?
No, I'm not going to go near it.
Councillor McRae has seconded the motion.
I'm not going to go near this one or the next one because I said I can't make an informed decision. I've always said if you're going to make a decision on planning, you should have your knowledge of what's going to happen. I don't have complete knowledge of what's going to happen here, so I'm going to vote against it. And to answer Councillor Taylor's question, yes, I'm ready to sign a rescission motion so we can have time to discuss it and get the information up. They'll come and get me.
Any discussion? Councillor... Councillor Miletto.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. I've had the opportunity to look at all the documentation, and I am in a position to make a decision here tonight. Firstly, I'd like to thank Council, in particular Waddell, Director of Development Services, and his staff for their detailed report which has been produced and provided to us. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the residents and ratepayers that took the time to forward their constructive submissions regarding the proposed domestic violence facility. Those comments were obviously read by myself and the majority of councillors, so thank you for that. I also acknowledge the late item which appears in this file. Also, as part of my role as a councillor, I've examined all other heads of legitimate concern, extensive documentation which has been provided to me. I can speak from my previous personal experience as a police officer, and there is no disputing the fact that Orange needs a domestic violence centre, and it needs one urgently. Domestic violence is committed by people from all sections of the community. There may be a perception or a stigma in this community that victims of domestic violence only come from lower or middle class or socio-economic backgrounds. I can confirm this is certainly not the case in my experience as a police officer. I can recall on numerous occasions where I was required to attend the residence of prominent businessmen and professional people who had assaulted their wives or partners, and those people lived in some of the most influential areas of Orange. First example which I'd like to provide is when I was as a police officer. I was required to go to such one resident, and upon arrival I was greeted by a prominent businessman who suggested that there weren't any problems at that location. It wasn't until I went inside and entering the house that I observed a distressed wife who was crying. It became quite quickly apparent to myself and the other officer that this woman had been assaulted. The businessman was escorted from the house and placed in the police vehicle where he was secured. Whilst removing the husband from the house, a small child asked me why the police taking their daddy away, and why did the mum have blood on her mouth. I returned inside the house a short time later and obtained a statement from the lady, who at the time was holding 2 teeth in her hand. The mother was and the child were then relocated to another area. The second example which I'd like to speak about was when I wasn't a police officer and I was working as a private investigator after leaving the police force. And people who have been around for a while will remember this lady or may be familiar with this name which I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about an incident which occurred in 2016 after I left the police force and was working as a private investigator. When I received a telephone call from a lady that she wanted to make an appointment to meet with me. I agreed to meet this lady outside a local cafe here in Orange. When I arrived at the meeting, this lady was carrying 3 false cap folders similar to what we have in front of us here today. She was a fragile lady in her 50s. We shook hands and she told me that her name was Catherine Smith. She told me that I'd been recommended to her by a friend and she was hoping that I could help her. I won't go into specific details about our conversations. Needless to say, Catherine Smith turned out to be one of the most remarkable women that I'd ever met. Catherine Smith was a victim of some of the worst acts of domestic violence I've ever witnessed or heard about. 20 years, Catherine Smith was abused by a controlling and sadistic, violent husband. His name was Kevin Smith. These offences took place on an isolated property several hours here from Orange. Catherine Smith came to Orange to seek help from this person. The abuse that Catherine Smith was subjected to was remarkably cruel and sadistic in nature. Catherine Smith spent the next decade trying to bring Catherine Smith to justice. After reading the information which Catherine provided me, became aware that Catherine had been to the police on no less than 18 occasions. He had been to the Director of Prosecutions and, in words, received very little or no assistance at the time. It was described to me to be one of the worst cases, it was later described as one of the worst cases of domestic violence in Australia. Catherine Smith was bashed, repeatedly raped, tortured, stalked by her husband. Kevin Smith, over a 30-year period, later described as a narcissistic psychopath. I remember Catherine Smith telling me how she would sleep at night with her eyes open. Over the course of a 30-year marriage, this mother of 6 was choked with an electrical cord, shot at with a 22-point calibre rifle, tortured with a cattle prod and threatened with a burning poker. She was also threatened with knives and guns. She was later diagnosed with suffering from battered wife syndrome. Rape was one of Kevin Smith's tools of punishment. I remember Catherine Smith telling me one evening, excuse me, she ran for more than 25 kilometres along a railway track to escape the brutality that she was at the hands of this man. Catherine told me that she didn't want to die because for all those years she fought hard to be alive and protect her children. In 1997, once all the children had left home, Catherine left her husband, but she was continually stalked, and so was her family. Catherine told me that there were times when her children didn't even know where she was because it wasn't safe for them to know where she was. Catherine spoke to me about her fear, denigration, and the humiliation inflicted upon her. Kevin Smith kidnapped her son. This is the father, kidnaps his son at gunpoint in 2000, that he was finally arrested by police. He held his son and partner hostage for 27 hours at gunpoint to extract the contact details of Catherine Smith. He was later arrested and charged with the offence and served a prison sentence. When Kevin Smith was released, Catherine Smith then watched him for 2 weeks, reporting his movements to her children. He was living in what she described was a fortified home with double deadlocks, grilled windows and CCTV around the whole perimeter. She told me that she and her children could not live normal lives. One of her children had moved overseas, one interstate, and another had to change their names. Kevin Smith was released from custody on the 30th of May 2006. Understand that on about the 14th of June 2006, Catherine was pushed to breaking point, at which time Catherine tracked Kevin down and confronted him with a gun. A scuffle broke out and shots were fired. However, nobody was injured. Catherine was arrested, and at the scene, she was later faced a trial of attempted murder. The jury heard the shocking details of Mrs. Smith's of Catherine's abuse and the marriage, and it only took them 25 minutes to acquit her of the charge. Court staff were reportedly in tears when the verdict was read out. This was one of the worst instances of domestic violence to come before the New South Wales court system. The judge demanded that police reinvestigate her allegations. Detectives from the professional standards took on the case, and Kevin Smith was charged with 17 offences, including 3 counts of attempted murder and several of sexual assault. Kevin Smith was sentenced in 2011 to 17 years jail with a non-parole period of 10 years. He died in prison of natural causes the 11th of September 2015. Catherine Smith can now live without fear. Smith said, and I quote, "I don't get any help from the authorities when I report incidents of domestic violence," she said. "It seems to me that police in the community accept domestic violence as a lesser crime than one that is committed by a stranger. The only time that I have felt completely safe from her ex-husband was when I was on remand and in prison, and I knew that he couldn't get to me." Counsellors, the cases that I've spoken about, the second one is in the extreme, and this may not be a situation which would be suitable to this domestic violence centre which we're speaking about here tonight. But what it does demonstrate is the unremarkable bond between a mother and her children. What are the odds and the fear that they will survive? But they can only do it with our help. Councillors, we can go home tonight and feel safe in our nice houses, as can probably most of the people here in the gallery tonight. However, there are some women and children living in our community who won't enjoy that same luxury. Women have a right to feel safe in our community, and so do their children. And I believe that as councillors, we have an obligation to ensure that that occurs. Catherine Smith, for people who may be interested, later appeared on an episode of Australian Story. And for those who are also interested, she now helps women going through similar experiences to what she did. Thank you.
Councillor Maletta. Any other speakers? Councillor Nugent.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to commend Leto on that story, that presentation. Obviously very difficult and very emotional, and very difficult for many of us to sit and listen to, but important that we know that what's going on in the community. And fortunately, domestic violence is a crime that's invisible to many people in the community. So to have that sort of presentation is important for all of us to hear when we're making this decision. I rise to speak in favour of the motion, which is in relation to the subdivision at this particular point in time. The subdivision will allow for that cul-de-sac to be opened up with traffic going down that cul-de-sac to the development. But I do feel for the people that live in George Wiley Place and in that area, because yes, your life that is the amenity of that area will be changed to some extent because there will be more traffic going down that area. However, I note that in the papers here, my understanding is that there's been vision for, or a conceptual plan for, opening up that to a subdivision development, Area 2, I think it's referred to, since in the DCP since 2004. So it's not as though it's something that's suddenly been thrust upon. It's been there for quite some time. So has been envisaged in the DCP. It is happening now. It may have happened if we were developing that land for some other purpose, but we happen to be developing it for this very important facility, this violence centre, which, again, it's a tragedy that Orange hasn't had one for so long.
Move the motion be put.
It's been moved that the motion be put. Is there a seconder? Given that you will have time to discuss any further with the next item. This is only for the subdivision, Councillor McRae. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Kidd's motion? Councillor Prevatira. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All those in favour of the putting the motion being put. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? Motion is carried. I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Those against?
I'm against.
1,
division
2,
as it stands at the moment.
Councillor Munro, which way did you go?
I'd like to see what.
You're voting yes or no?
Yeah, I'm voting against it because I think it's important to.
That's all I want to know. Okay, the motion has been carried. The next item is 2.3, which is the development application, George Wiley Place. Been put and seconded. Councillor Nugent. Discussion. Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. We've had a lot of discussion and a lot of very well argued, well presented cases tonight. We do have the challenge as councillors to make hard decisions. It's our role and our responsibility, and we need to assess this proposal on its planning merits as we do every other planning one, and us newer councillors are often reminded of that. We've had the question of does it comply? Seems that it's a yes. Is it allowable? Yes, on the basis that it is needed. And unfortunately, it is necessary. The statistics, Orange has doubled the state average of domestic violence, and this facility is projected to assist 72 families per year. I'll reinforce, a number of speakers have said that all parts of our community are impacted by domestic violence, but it is by far women and children who are affected, whether it's regardless of gender, sexuality, age or social status. As Mr Heen actually said, although speaking against it, it happens in all neighbourhoods. A speaker tonight spoke about the Brisbane airport being a domestic violence incident. I can attest to when living in Cabon, there was a siege next door. Sieges related to domestic violence are not isolated to public spaces nor to domestic violence facilities. They are unfortunately in every neighbourhood and every part, sadly at increased rates, domestic violence in Orange. The planning for me is pretty clear. It ticks the boxes and I'll be voting for it. But there have been a number of questions raised about the impact it will have on those local residents. I understand their concerns. But for those of us, and I'm sure there are many of them, who have supplied household goods to family members or friends who need to set up a new home, whether that's an ironing board so they can still be presentable to get to work, or the spare sheets and towels that you have in your linen cupboard so that they have something to sleep on and something to dry themselves with and their kids after a shower. Whether it's having provided cash to someone who needs accommodation in a local motel, or maybe they need the fuel to get back home to where their parents are, which they know is a safe space for them to sleep. And indeed, to those of us, and I would like to think there are members of the Ploughman's Hill community who have given a bed to someone who needs somewhere to sleep. A number of years ago, I provided accommodation to a friend who needed to escape being raped by a family member. These situations are sadly all too common, and it is a privilege for those of us who have the support to offer. It should be in every neighbourhood that we are preventing, and we shouldn't need to have a domestic violence facility, but sadly we do. Councillor Miletto spoke very powerfully, with depth, to the breadth of impact it has had on him in his professional career. "20 years ago, I sought a safe refuge myself to leave an abusive and controlling relationship. And in most of the conversation around Orange's need for domestic violence, I've not been ready to put my hand up. I've not attended a white tie ball. I've not been part of the round table or many of the opportunities to support because it affects some of us very closely. But tonight I say, for those who are in the situation who need support, this is the opportunity for Orange to stand up and put the wheels in motion for providing this facility. We need it, and we need it at this scale, not because it's a holiday resort for women who want to get a little breakaway with the kids. It is a place of last resort for those under duress, suffering extreme circumstances. It is a sanctuary for kids who want to ride their bikes down their street safely, who want to continue life as normally as they can, attending school, and perhaps it is playing with the other kids in the neighbourhood. They need a safe and secure place, and this neighbourhood sounds like it already has that in spades. There are arguments about the impact it will have on housing prices, and I acknowledge that is a concern. 2 weeks of discussion of a rescission motion will surely do nothing for the house prices of Orange in terms of the perception of our community in the region. Our high rates of domestic violence surely won't go well. But I also ask, what is the price of a life lost because we do not have a facility to separate victims from their perpetrators?
Councillor Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a quick point before I start. We're dealing with a planning matter. a planning matter. This is a DA like any other DA that's put in front of us. I understand the emotion as far as this issue is concerned, but I also take on board the concerns of the residents who have every right to voice those concerns. A few weeks ago we had probably people who some people may describe as a high end of town, business people in here, are objecting to a toilet facility across the road. They were heard. That was voted on in their favour. These people have exactly the same rights. We are not here debating tonight the need for a domestic violence facility in this city. That is not the debate that is in front of us. It is a development application. Now, it's not, as I said before, it's not debatable. It's unambiguous. As far as the need for it, yes, we have a need for a facility, a much overdue need for it. But it's about how this facility in its current location, is it suitable, and what will be the effects on the community that live there. People who have put their life savings into their homes, they have real concerns. They have concerns based on planning issues. Traffic, security. And they have a right to express those. There is no debate as far as they've indicated on the need for a facility. We all agree that is the case. And because this is an emotive issue and it's something that everyone agrees with, would not negate the fact that this to be dealt with as a planning issue. Now, I've discussed it in the previous addresses to Council as far as the access. Some of the objectors and the people, the residents up around George Wiley have indicated that the access, if it could be looked at, would understandably not really want the facility in their area, but the fact of the matter is that they might be able to come to some compromise. Council has voted on that. Council has steered this down the direction of let's push this through tonight. Let's have this over and done with tonight. Let's push it through because we want to say, look, we support a domestic violence refuge. Of course we do. Of course we do. But we're not here. I need councillors tonight, more councillors will probably speak up and tell us of instances where they know domestic violence exists. We know that Orange has an appalling record. And we know that it's a facility that has to be put in place. The funding is there. There has been a compromise as far as the residents up there as far as the access is concerned. The only other alternative would be another site, and I understand that that would delay this an incredible amount of time, and that's not an option that I would like to consider. But I really express again my concerns. It puts me in an incredibly difficult position.
Councillor Taylor, could I ask you to respect that we are limited to 5 minutes generally?
Okay, well, Mr Chairman, all I'm saying is that it puts me in a very difficult position here tonight because if I vote against this, I'm going to be accused of not supporting a domestic violence facility in Orange. No, that is not the case. I do not believe that the concerns of the residents up there have been addressed. I asked for 2 weeks. That was denied by the council. They didn't ask for much. They just asked that council listen to them for 2 more weeks. There's going to be no extra life saved for a 2-week delay, and I know we've debated that. It's not going to be there in 2 weeks' time. Let's do it and do it right. But obviously that's a decision council have made. They want to push this through tonight. I know that some of the residents feel that this is being forced through, it's being pushed through, and they haven't had adequate consultation. I'm with them, and I'm going to join Councillor Duffy now because I'm not going to stand here being accused of voting against a facility in this city which is much, much needed. And one point, Mr Chairman, I'll make is that I heard several speakers here tonight say that in favour of the facility, they're about DVOs. Well, DVOs, I would ask any people in this field, the majority of women, there are a tragic amount of women that are killed by partners and perpetrators of domestic violence killed in this country every week. And I think you'll find the majority of the perpetrators have DVOs on them. So as far as that addressing the security, I don't think that is adequate.
The other speakers, Councillor Munro.
Stay there for a minute. Yes, I do have some more to say, and it's pretty much along same lines. You want to get into warm and fuzzy. I've got some history, and I know all about domestic violence. And I have got a heart about what we're about to vote on. You need domestic violence centre. I've seen cousins terribly abused. I've seen aunties terribly abused, and it has scarred me as a child. And it made me think about what I did with my girls and how I educated them so they wouldn't have to put up with some bastard. So yes, I am emotional about this, but I am also, in respect of what Councillor Taylor says in regards to the people in a quiet cul-de-sac. I do agree with the location, and I would vote for it tonight, 100%. We could do something about an access on the Escort Way. I think that is a genuine compromise for the people in that cul-de-sac. I do think that if we try hard, we show some flaming leadership from occasionally in this council, I'm sure that we could actually achieve that goal. We cut a block of ground off our subdivision or whatever. I'm talking to the planner earlier, and there's no reason why the blocks can't be rewritten. You know, you're going to tell me to sit down, I know, so that's okay. But I would like what I said before to happen, and I'll be supporting the motion. So you do have the 2 weeks. You've got 3 councillors. 4 councillors. All I want is a bit of time for this general manager to do his due diligence, planners, and the quality of staff we have here are fantastic. Let them do their job. Let them push something for 2 weeks. Come back, give us an answer. If they say no, it cannot be done, no way. RMS haven't got a heart. They don't give a shit about Orange. Sorry, I retract that. Then so be it. At least we tried. And that's what we're here to do. Councillors, do our due diligence to these people, the residents in that cul-de-sac, as well as the women and children that are abused.
Sorry. Well, I will speak in favour of the motion. I have taken on board, I can assure you, the concerns of the residents and also what the councillors have said. I have complete confidence in Housing Plus in able to manage this facility in a very professional manner. When I was the state member, I often had dealings with Housing Plus. One in particular, where a young Aboriginal woman came in, a resident came in to see me because she had heard an Aboriginal woman was being put in a house just down the road from her in Turner Crescent, I think it was. And I spoke to Housing Plus about that lady's concerns, and the Housing Plus representative said, is that lady aware there are already 4 Aboriginal families in her street? She wasn't, because they were completely unaffected her lifestyle. They behaved themselves. They were recommended by Housing Plus, and they were very proud and privileged to be living in that street. As the state member also, I had on more than one occasion young married women with children that came into my office that had been abused, and one in particular, and it's virtually a scenario of all the others as well, said, Mr Turner, if I can't get somewhere else to go tonight, I'll have to go back to that bastard and get bashed again. She didn't have an alternative.
Councillor Turner, can I just ask you to request that the councillors outside there, getting in debate with people out there, you can't hear here. Muffing it out, either close the door or ask those councillors to return.
That door? Someone's closed the door, Councillor Kidd. So I will be supporting this motion tonight because some people have also said that it should be out at Bloomfield, should be out near the hospital. That state government and all the, as far as I'm aware, all the facilities that have been put in New South Wales that have worked the best have been in a residential area. As an example of people not being comfortable about being around a hospital, I, as a blood donor, am aware that when we put the mobile blood banks on the road, go to Dubbo and to Mudgee and Cowra and all those wonderful places, the donations nearly doubled against what they were when they were the blood bank used to operate out of a facility within the hospital. People are uncomfortable in general, unless they've got something wrong with them, about going to a hospital. So that whole area of Bloomfield, as much as I respect the facility out there, young mothers are not comfortable. They are more comfortable being in a facility in a residential area. I've also been told that it is not feasible for those young mothers to be taken out of town, say to Bathurst or to Dubbo, to a similar facility, because in most cases the mothers have children, they want the children to keep attending the school that they're attending, etc., etc. So it is compelling reasons why a facility such as being proposed goes into a residential area, and I am comfortable that once that facility has been built and it is settled down, 99.9% of the concerns of the residents will be unfounded. I am absolutely confident in saying that, because I have, again, as a councillor and as a state member, when quite often we have a development for what we call an infill development, where 4 or 5 units go in behind an old residential house. We get the complaints about, oh, they're all going to be rentals, there's going to be late night parties, etc., etc. In most cases, we allow that development to go ahead. We don't hear anything about the concerns again, because those concerns have been 99% of the time unfounded. I am not saying that you will never have an incident. You may have an incident from time to time, but we have incidents in every street in Orange. It doesn't matter what street in Orange that is. We have the probability of having an unfortunate domestic incident. So I'm not saying you will never have a problem, but these women and those children deserve the best opportunity to get back and start to live a normal life. No other speakers. I'll put the motion. You're all aware of what the motion is. All those in favour? Decision of those councillors in the room is unanimous.
No, I'd like it noted as unanimous.
I've already said that, and it will be noted that it is unanimous. Would you invite those councillors outside to return if they wish to? Point 4 was the animal shelter down in Astle Drive.
Move the motion.
Hang on, we'll give them an opportunity to turn. Councillor Taylor is not returning. The motion has been put by Councillor Kidd and Councillor Nugent. Any discussion?
Which one is the one we talked about on?
This is the animal shelter in Astle Drive, 2.4.
That's all right, sir.
Well, you've had time to read that one, Councillor Duffy. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. 2.5 has been dealt with. That completes the planning and development.
That's the late item.
Excuse me, with a...
That's just a copy.
Just a motion that we note the late item.
Seconds.
It's just been moved and seconded that we note it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. I'm sick of, Mr. Chairman, I'm sick of these.
You're against, so that'll do.
I'm against, yeah. I'm sick of these things getting dumped on us, and we've got to give 10 days notice. There's not an equal balance there.
Thank you, Councillor
Not
Duffy.
just this one, it's others.
You will call on Councillor Miletto.
Or Turner. Time being 9:35 p.m. I declare the meeting open for the Employment and Economic Development Policy Committee meeting. Item number 1.1, declaration of peculiar interest, significant non-peculiar interest and less than significant peculiar interest. Recommendation is that any committee member now disclose any conflicts of interest in matters under consideration by the Employment and Economic Development Policy Committee at this meeting. Are there any?
Thanks, Councillor Miletto. Regarding page 15, regarding the scout camp, and very good article in the paper the other day of the upgrade. Could I ask? Yeah, where's? Back in a second. I just wanted confidence that we're.
And shut the door, please.
Waiting for.
Speaker.
We're waiting for Mr. Maunders to return.
What's this, mate?
Mr. Maunders, I just on page 15 regarding the scout camp out at Lake Canobolas, just want to ask, have we been kept in touch with the scouts in regarding the overall project? Who are we speaking to? Is it the head office down in Sydney or the local scouting group? And have the upgrade, the plans been given to them, and do we have their approval? And then also, and I've also mentioned in the past about the front gate and the upgrade of the front gate as a future project. Is there any discussion about renaming the facility? Maybe part to do with this, acknowledging the scouts, but to give the general public more of an indication that it is now a Orange City Council facility.
Yeah, I haven't been directly involved with the discussions late. Yeah, I can't. Have you been? I've got a fair handle on it, but I haven't been directly involved. So.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think we'll have to take that one on notice.
Okay.
We were in the early days. We'll probably just have to check where the status is up to.
Yeah, well, I say it's pretty important to keep in touch with them. And
so broadly, the scouts have relinquished control of the site, so it's now a council site. So the formal aspect of it is that it's now our site for control and management, into an arrangement with the scouts to provide them access to. And we were going to have a joint committee, if you like, between council and all the future development that have been presented to the state government and have that's about the level of refurbishment. So that was all about the amenity. Those plans that were developed 3 to 4 years ago have been consistent. They've been modified in some regard, but they've been consistent. I can't talk to the current discussions with them. One of the initial discussion points was about retaining the name. That's
long as you keep that in mind, that I'm comfortable. 15 of that.
15/22, so
appear on the page, yes.
22 of the business paper and 15 of the...
Item number 2.1, minutes of the Economic Development Community.
Moved.
Move the recommendation. Councillor Kidd, do you have a seconder? Or do you want the recommendations read out, or is there any further discussion with regards to the recommendations, being that we acknowledge the report presented to the Economic Development Committee and its meeting held on the 21st of November 2018? The recommendations. 4.3 from the minutes of the Economic Development Community Committee meeting on that date being 4.3 that the committee endorse, activate our strategic vision and strongly recommend to the council to call on the New South Wales and federal government and candidates in the 2019 New South Wales and federal election to commit to investing in this strategy to grow jobs, economic activity, cultural amenities and opportunity for people and businesses in Orange. Number 3, to adopt the remainder of the minutes of the Economic Development Community Committee that was held on the 21st of November 2018. That's been moved by Councillor Kidd and seconded by Councillor Munro. Thank you. All in favour? Carried. With regards to the minutes, Mr. Burdick, minor correction. If somebody has cut and pasted Councillor Whitten as the chairperson.
Let them know too.
That completes the Employment and Economic Development Policy discussion, with the time being 9:40 p.m. and I now call upon Councillor Romano.
Yeah. Boy,
Infrastructure Policy Committee.
thank you. Talking in class, sir. By surprise. So, Miletto, I'd like to open the Infrastructure Policy Committee meeting of the 5th of February, with the time being, is that 9:45? 9:42. Does any councillor have a pecuniary interest, significant non-pecuniary interest, or less than significant non-pecuniary interest in any matter listed in the consideration for tonight? Answer no. Section 2, the committee minutes. Item 2.1, minutes of the City of Orange Traffic Committee meeting of the 11th of December.
Move the recommendation.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Kidd, seconded by Councillor Turner. Do we have any discussion on this item? Councillor McRae, I was only going to say Miletto.
Thank you, Councillor Romano. Just a question in regards to the William Maker Drive, Northern Distributor Road, Hill Street roundabout. Is there any idea of a time frame of completion? Because this going through will have, I think, a large amount of community interest. And the first question they're going to ask me, like the Cargo Road roadworks, is when will it be finished?
When will it be finished? It's actually subject to a live application at the moment, a grant application. So we will wait for that funding.
So we have no idea when that could come through.
It could come through in any time.
We don't really know.
Particularly coming elections, I'm actually hopeful with the upcoming elections, both state and federal, that I am hopeful that we would get funding within the month.
Thank you, Mr. Grenham. Any further discussion on this item? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Agreed. Section 2. The committee minutes of the Airport Community Committee meeting of the 5th of December.
Moved.
The recommendation on page 41. It's moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Miletto. Any discussion on this item, councillors? No.
Question, Councillor. Just wondering whether the relevant director could indicate. I know there was, I think it might be Mr. Maunder, is it? Curious about this issue. Just with regards, I know that council had a couple of grants in, and we're waiting to hear back about those. I'm just wondering whether there's been any result or movement on those.
Yes. Just through the chair, if I may, we have responded to a number of requests for additional information. They've been fairly, those requests for additional information have been fairly minor in their nature, so I am hopeful of a positive result within the month, similar to the previous.
Is that in regards to grants for infrastructure or the security issues which were previously addressed by Councillor Romano?
They're slightly separate issues, so albeit the grants do involve additional security, additional car parking, additional lighting.
Thank you.
Mr Chair, can I ask a question, please?
Certainly.
Have we had lots of break and enters to motor vehicles out at the airport, or have we just had a spate, or what's the story with them?
We had an initial spate of 2 within a fortnight, and then a follow-up one about 2 months later. I understand there was an arrest made and charges laid in relation to the first 2 events. I haven't heard anything in relation to the latest event.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Was that 3.2? No. 3.1? 3.2 is next. The New South Wales Australian Water Association. Oh, current works. There's a recommendation on page 53.
Move the recommendation.
Against.
Any discussion on this item? No discussion. I'll put the motion. There is a discussion.
Look, listen, on the current works, I've noticed around town that we've just been putting a seal over a lot of the streets, and we're doing no actually relaying of any surface or not. I noticed the one along Clinton Street, it is still rough, but there is a seal on there. Is that seal just to protect the surface so the water doesn't get worse when it starts to winter, to rain? Or the same things happen out on Ophir Road, and I noticed it happen on a couple of other streets. Is it just a seal to stop the water getting in, or is that a repair?
You're exactly right. It is just a seal to stop the water getting in. Most seals have a defined life.
Like the word, exactly right. Yes.
Yes.
Once
they will oxidise and eventually let water in, even though you may not see any sign of deformation or anything along those lines. So there are a number of reseals that we're doing through routinely. They've all been programmed.
Any further discussion?
Just one discussion on this. This is under the works with the water. I'd just like to again congratulate the community of Orange in how they're keeping their consumptive use of water down to around that 220 litres per person per day. Met yesterday with Tina Keneally as a senator with the federal government. Labor applicant for there, and we were talking about water and so forth, and they were absolutely amazed. They had no idea that our consumption per use is about half what Bathurst and Dubbo is for a start. Canberra, and it was, and they were quite astounded, and I'm sure that they're going to be contacting relevant staff in the future to have a look at our water management schemes, which is the whole stormwater harvesting, use of the bores and so forth. So I'm sure in the near future you'll them.
Further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Section 3, item 3.2, the New South Wales Australian Water Association conference in 2019, this year.
Happy to move it.
Recommendation on page 64, moved by Councillor Duffy, I believe. Was it Councillor Duffy or Nugent?
Yep, Councillor Duffy.
Himself. Seconded by Councillor Munro. Any discussion? No discussion? Or,
talking about water, how about we get some commitments from our federal member, Andrew G., in regards to promises that were made last election about Cranky Rock Dam, other infrastructure projects, and invite him again to speak to council in regard to these major infrastructure in our region and talk about things that he's going to implement for our region, our council. At the next election, I'd like another letter. As far as I'm concerned, I feel that this council's been sidestepped by that federal member. We've asked him numerous times, and if he's a true Conservative and understands that democracy works from the ground up, we need to really get through to him that we deserve to be seen, to be heard as a community. So I'd like to invite him. I'd like to invite any other representatives that are going to stand for election next couple of months to ascertain their thoughts, their wishes for our region, our community.
Will you be speaking there?
I won't be speaking there.
Chairman, just following up on Councillor Munro, I think it's an absolutely fantastic idea to write to the federal member and invite him back to address the issue of a low-level bridge at the Long Point, which was going to hit, but we could also make it as though we could put a low-level dam wall there to get more water to pump in from the Macquarie pipeline. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah,
Let's ask him that question too.
Move.
One of his promises.
Not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. That concludes the Infrastructure Policy Committee, and I'll pass it on to Councillor Hamling for Sports and Recreation Committee.
I'll open the Sport and Recreation Policy Committee at 10 to 10. I'll call on any declarations of pecuniary interests. None of those. I'll move to item 2.1, page number 5, minutes of the Parks, Trees, Waterways Community Committee. Yeah, minutes.
Move the motion.
Moved by Councillor Nugent, seconded by Councillor Mileto. Any discussion? Councillor Taylor.
Only general, Mr. Chairman. Why is it we can take down trees that have a branch taken off them in a storm in a day or two? And I've just experienced 2 years of trying to get a dead tree removed from an old lady's front of a house. I've also had another case brought to me in recent days of a gentleman who raised an issue with me, and I know it was in the middle of winter last year because it was there was a big frost on the ground the morning I went out and inspected it. Whereas pine trees on Ploughman's Lane, those pine trees are dangerous. They look like they'd come down at any moment. They're our trees, and as yet he's never not heard from anyone. Nothing's been done. And when we have a storm, a tree, perfectly good trees, lose a branch, and we knock them down. We'd make Canadian lumberjacks proud. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. There needs to be some sort of consistency in the policy we have as far as problem trees are concerned around the city. There are a number of them. There's a number of dead ones all over the city. You drive around, you find them. But can you get those removed? No. Or if they're problem trees that lift the gutter, can you get those removed? No. You've got to go through an extended process. But yet we have no problems knocking down healthy trees. And I'm not an expert as far as a tree is concerned, but all I know is a number of residents have raised concerns with me to say that the trees had lost a branch. And then within 2 days, the chainsaws are there, they're mulching them up, and they're gone, disappeared. Tree stump grinders in, there's no sign of them left. I don't think it's good enough. And there's suckers all over the trees all over town. We're not addressing those. I think we really should have a close look at the policy and the way we do handle trees around this city, street trees around this city, because I tell you what, it's upset a lot of people.
Evan, yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duffy, you sit down for a second, please. Was that a question you were asking, or you're asking a question? Sit down, I'll get the question answered.
Thank you,
someone answer that
Mr.
question,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll sit down.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to bring a report back to council on policy. Our arborists make an assessment on every tree that they remove. It's a lot easier for our staff to remove a branch and back and replace it. There's 18,000 trees in Orange. Assessment made on those as to their danger and their charge for their removal. Our professional staff do that every day.
What about consultation with people that are affected, where trees are outside their homes?
Councillor Taylor, can
it's assessed by professionals that know what they're talking about. Now, whether a person thinks a tree, layperson thinks it's moved or should remain, material. It's made by a professional, arborist.
I'm not, in all respect.
Taylor, can you just finish this?
Yeah, respect, Mr. Minder. I asked about consultation with the people that are affected by losing that tree out the front.
It's dangerous, then it needs to be removed as a set.
I'll show you a few.
Okay, we'll have that.
I tried to answer the question, Councillor.
Yeah.
I'm happy to bring a report back if you want on the policy. You can review it. I have no issue.
I'm out at Ploughman's Lane in front of Mr. Ted Porch's property.
Showing me, Councillor, I'm not an arborist. I wouldn't know.
Mr. Chairman, are we debating with staff or not?
No. Sit down,
are we debating with staff or are we
Duffy,
debating amongst
down.
ourselves?
Councillor Duffy, sit down.
Sit down, Mr. Chairman. Can't you see?
I'll show. I'm happy to show the three staff Mr. Ted Porch's property where they've got dangerous pine trees in front of them. I met with him last year, middle of winter. Nothing's been done. A branch has come down. I noticed it going out to George Wiley afternoon. I noticed that the tree branch had come down and Mr. Porch had rung me. And still nothing's happened.
Let's organise that inspection.
We'll get an inspection done.
Take it from there.
Mr. General Manager, I've asked you and I've asked directors to address the issue and they haven't been.
I was aware of it days ago.
You were, your director wasn't.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm glad you've noticed me. Mr. Chairman, listen, I don't know where this committee has got its head, but I go out on that balcony out there and you can see 5 garden beds with about half a dozen irises in it, and absolutely disgusting. And up along the side there's some grass that's nearly burnt off and all those type of things there. There was a branch in the park over there all through over Christmas period. It was there for 6 weeks. And you go across to Summer Street. Right across Summer Street there, and there's a tree, half dead, half alive. What's going on around the place? These people in here in the CBD are paying a third more in rates, and what was that levy put on for? Beautification of the city. So what do? Kill the trees or make them half dead? Or we don't put any water on them? Sprinkle those trees down there with a sprinkler and they'll die. They've never seen one for 5 years. They don't know what it is.
Right.
I'll tell you, I think this needs a bit more than just a few trees. This whole trees. Councillor, I'll go for a drive up around Glenroy and you'll see suckers on tree about this high. We haven't taken anyone down. You'll go for a drive up around other areas of town. The same thing is occurring. Why aren't we managing it properly? I think we don't need a bit more than investigation than just into this and just trees. I think things are a little bit appalling. I've never seen the city look so bad over Christmas, ever.
Come on past my place, though. Councillor, I noticed that my lawn was dead too. We could have a look at that.
Okay. Councillor Duffy, you finished?
Yeah. I'll be back. Don't worry about that. I'll be back.
Can't wait.
So the recommendation.
Yeah. Any other speakers?
I've asked my question.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. So report coming back. Report coming back for you, Councillor Taylor. Are you happy with that, or
I'd like Mr. Porch's trees addressed, please, if I may.
No worries. Okay, I'll move the recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. Move on to item 2.2, the Orange Showground Community Committee held on the 4th of December on page 57. Moved by Councillor Kidd. Second by Councillor Turner. Councillor Romano.
Question on the shed at the showground.
Is this in the report? Is this in the minutes?
No, but can I ask a question?
Matter arising, is it?
Matter arising, yeah.
Just wondering.
How's the where are we placed with the archery? Through you, Mr. Stiles. The last conversation I think we had, you stated that it may be ready by as early as February, and I've had contact with the archery club. They actually contacted me and asked me when they can start using the facility, and I repeated what you had said at the time. Can I get clarification as to what's happening with it?
I'd have to take that on notice, and
that's fine.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the resolution the council was for the last council meeting when we took the be included in the next quarterly report for funding for the archery. So that.
So when's that? In February.
Yep.
So you're
so
right.
Provided council approves it, then we can commence.
We did get approval from the council, didn't we?
The resolution was to consider it in the next quarterly.
Your funding.
That's in mechanism.
The funding from memory was 14,000.
That's correct.
Yeah.
19th February. Councillor Duffy.
Yes, my question is, Mr. Chairman, how long has the new building been over at the showground, the new shed?
number of years.
Number of years. So we can safely say 2. Can I have a report back to council, come back to council, to all councillors? How many times has that been leased out or been used, been utilised? I think we really need to know that, because it's a $2 million shed and it looks empty every time I drive past it every day.
You know the story behind that. A certain councillor wanted it there and got it.
Other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. I'll do the minutes of the Australia Day Community Committee on page 73, moved by Councillor Kidd, seconded by Councillor Turner. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make note of how successful our Australia Day was this year. Some suggested that the numbers were down a little bit. Some put that down to the heat. Some put that down to the fact that it was then going to be a long weekend, and others had gone away. But the Rotary Club and the Lions sold the 600 bacon and egg rolls at about the same time as they normally do. And then the Lions went on then and sold sausage sandwiches, etc., etc. An indication that it was a little bit warm, but how successful all the stalls were. One of the stall holders gave us an extra $100 donation. So that's an indication that the stall holders were doing reasonably well. But, Mr. Chairman, I'd certainly like to thank Rachel Robertson, our events officer, Lynn Goff and her staff that were up there at 5:30 in the morning, getting all the marquees up and getting chairs and tables out for the committee. And as I said, I'd certainly like to thank the stall holders, including the vintage cars and the fire brigade that were there, because they all helped to make the feeling on the day. Again, the Orange Male Voice Choir, the Orange Brass Band, the Scouts that always come down to raise the flag, and the not quite sure what they call themselves, the dance club. I'd certainly like to congratulate and thank Catherine Tolner with her volunteer committee. I know Councillor Kidd and myself are on that committee as well, but the others are volunteers, and they meet regularly all through the year to make sure that when the event is held on the day that it is successful. We had no bats this year, which was a blessing. We have tended to move all the displays and events towards Summer Street. A couple of people commented that there was nothing down on the Kite Street end, but purely and simply that was because of the bats that have been there in the past. But this year we had none at all in that particular area on that day, so that was great. So, and again, I'd like to congratulate and thank our Ambassador, Katrina Roundtree, that has come back again this year. She was our Ambassador about 9 years ago, I think it was. And she was certainly full of praise for Orange and full of praise for our wine and our food and just the general feeling of confidence that she picks up in the city with all the residents, and she thought it was fantastic, and she hoped that it would come back again, that she may come back again one day. But again, pass on our thanks to all the staff that helped there on the day, especially Lynn and her staff up at the Robertson Park itself, and also to Rachel, who made sure and has made sure all year at all the meetings that everything runs smoothly. But again, it was a great day. Bit disappointed. They may have been hiding somewhere, but I was just a little bit disappointed in the amount of councillors that actually turned up. I didn't see too many. They may have been in the background, and because it was quite a big crowd. So if they were there, great. As it weren't, try and make it next year.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. That was a really good summation of the day. I wasn't there. I apologise for that. I was working, but I think I'd like to make a comment about Australia Day and what it means to me. I think Australia Day should stay on the 26th. I'm glad this council hasn't joined other councils in the fight to try and change the day. I think that's really important.
Point of order.
Point of order. Well, that's my opinion. Please just let me have a chat about it. I think it's really...
What's this got to do with is this just a matter of...
Just talking, matter arising about Australia Day and how important it is. And I think for me, the date is important. For me as a convict stock, I think it's very important that we celebrate the day for all Australians and everybody that's made this country what it is today.
Thanks, Councillor Munro. Any other Councillor Nugent.
Just a quick comment to follow on, thanks Mr Chair, from Councillor Turner. I was actually at the Australia Day celebrations, helping gold seekers volunteering, and we did bump into each other. But it's really just a comment about Cook Park. It looked fantastic that day, and I've had a number of occasions to walk through it or be in Cook Park over the last couple of weeks. And I just think Cook Park's looking fantastic. It's looking the best probably I've ever seen it. We hear a lot of negativity in this chamber about, our city. I'd like to say, in a positive sense, looking fantastic, and I would commend Lynn Goff and her team at the park for the work that they do.
So clarification there, Mr Chairman, legitimate concerns, not negativity, legitimate concerns.
Okay, any other speakers on the minutes of the Australia Day Committee in December?
Very pleased to see the interest.
All those in favour say aye. Item 2.4. Well, here we go again. Minutes of the Australia Day Community Committee on the 9th of January. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Kidd. Any speakers?
Has there been any discussion by any of the members of the committee to change the date of Australia Day?
No.
Thanks, Councillor Kidd. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Just like to ask one question about how come the minutes, the parks, trees, waterways is in the Sport and Rec Committee? Shouldn't it be an Environment Committee?
I believe it should be.
Trees and stumps.
Anyway.
Sorry. The greyhounds use them as they run past.
Sorry, I believe it actually should be in the...
I believe it, especially after that one.
If you check out the...
Righto. I'll close the meeting at 10 past 10.
You didn't know what you're talking about.
Council Privet 2, sorry?
Handled it all.
Sorry? I didn't know what I was talking about.
Which committee is this?
I'd like to open the Environmental Sustainability Policy Committee on the 5th of February, time being 10. Does any councillor have a pecuniary interest, significant non-pecuniary interest, or less than significant pecuniary interest on any matter listed for consideration at the meeting? Item 2.1.
Happy to move it.
Seconds.
Moved by Kevin Duffy and second by Steve Nugent. Any discussion? The item? Then we'll put the motion, all four.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. That concludes the Environmental Sustainability Policy Committee. Time being 10:04.
Well,
nice and quick. On the Finance Policy Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Prevotera. I'd like to open the Finance Policy Committee meeting on 5th of February 2019 with the time being 10:13. Does any councillor have any pecuniary interest, significant non-pecuniary interest or less than significant non-pecuniary interest in any matter listed for consideration at this meeting? Councillor Miletto.
Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest not significant in relation to donations. And item 3, the recommendations that a donation of $1,000 be made to the Waratah Football Club. As I previously indicated, I'm president of the Orange District Football Association, and that football club made representations to our association also.
Thank you, Councillor Miletto. On requests for financial assistance, item 2.1.
I'll move the recommendations.
Recommendation on
number
page
3,
6.
so Councillor Miletto may. You want?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll move them all. 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6.
Do I have a seconder?
Leave 3 until
4, 5 and 6. Thank you, Councillor Nugent. Any discussion on these items? 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6? There's some
Madam
thoughts
Chair,
of discussion. Councillor Nugent.
Just a very quick comment. I think under item 4, it's great to see a donation being made to someone representing the city in cultural activity rather than just sporting activities as a member of the Sydney Youth Orchestra flagship ensemble, and that's great to see.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Councillor McRae. While supporting the recommendation, I do ask, as far as the first one, the Wentworth Golf Club be declined, on page 7, with the request from Wentworth Golf Club of $354 is the tipping fee cost. It's my understanding removal of displaced vegetation. Is that another word for green waste? And I understood that green waste can be tipped at the Resource Recovery Centre for free. So that would remove $354 of their cost, although I support the motion in general that we don't support the rest of it.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. It's a good pickup. Can anyone clarify that? Is there a difference for commercial or operations disposing of green waste compared to the householders?
I believe there is something in the fees and charges, yes.
My understanding as a councillor and a regular user of the Resource Recovery Centre to drop green waste, every time I'm up there are commercial operators dropping green waste, and as far as I'm aware, they're not charged. In general, there's no charge for green waste, is my understanding.
Look, can I recommend that perhaps just refer this and actually have a look at it. I think there may be an anomaly there that's been picked up.
Thank you, Councillor Kidd. In any case, it doesn't change that we're still declining their application, but perhaps relevant staff might, when they advise them of their lack of success, ensure that we are advising them of the correct tipping fees.
Yeah. Inform them that that 354 could possibly be waived. Get that clarified.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Any further discussion on items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6? Let's put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried, unanimous. Councillor Miletto didn't want to be involved in item 3. Is that correct? So we'll put, do I have somebody to put item 3 of those motions? Thank you, Councillor Munro, seconded by Councillor Prevotera. Any discussion? Put the motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This
on
is
the number 3, the donation to Orange Waratah Soccer Club.
I'm just you're declaring an interest, or you're staying, or what?
He doesn't have to leave.
I'm happy with it. I have a problem with it, not because it's soccer or whatever it is, and the person is coming. I think we have rugby league players that come to this town. We have cricket players come to this town. We have top class tennis players that come to these towns, and all these type of things there. Is this setting a precedent that when some top class sportsman comes to town, we give him $1,000 or whatever, $100?
Without,
you said you weren't taking part. That's my question. I don't care if he gets $500 or $1,000. I'm just worried about the precedent that we're setting.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy.
Come down here and coach at Wade Park for rugby league, played cricket, played football for Australia.
I think we should encourage, in that case, I think we should encourage any of those clubs who are providing those development opportunities to submit applications seeking funding to support them. It doesn't actually clarify as I have read that the payment was directly to that particular person. It may well have been in regards to actually running the event. But I think it's a fantastic opportunity to encourage all of the clubs and associations in Orange to submit applications for donations, because then we can judge it against our criteria and as councillors make our decisions. Councillor Hamling.
Yeah, really hate to say this, but I'm sort of in agreement with Councillor Duffy. If a rugby league player or a rugby union player wants to come up and promote their sport, I can't see why we've got to fork out money for it. It should be part of the Soccer Federation of Australia or Australian Rugby Union or Australian Rugby League to promote the game and meet the cost, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
I just don't know, what's the $1,000 for? I'm looking at the application.
There's usually an itemised budget. Can anyone tell me what page
page 8.
that's on?
33.
I know that Councillor Miletto can't be involved in the vote. I'm sure he knows what's going on about it. Are we allowed to ask him?
Can I just clarify there? I think when there is the declaration of interest, you don't have to leave the room, but you not certainly right, but I think it is relevant, and I'll ask the question because I've been involved. Asked from Ms. Miletto.
I'll second it.
I'm asking the manager.
Clarification can be sought. No, cannot vote on the matter. Debate, but
I'll
could
ask
answer some
Councillor Miletto a
questions.
question. Councillor Miletto, with your soccer hat on, could you explain what's going on here?
My understanding is that the donation is sought because what we're trying to do here in Orange is promote female participation, or bringing this high-profile person here. That was one of the means of doing that, to run coaching courses, etc. So it was to promote female participation.
What were the costs?
I don't know the exact figure, but I think it was around 6,000.
Or what were the things that had to be provided, that had to be paid for?
I wasn't privy to those details.
I want a clarification, if I can, from the staff as well here. So if Orange Sims or Emus or Orange City or want someone to come to town to promote sport in juniors, or over 50s or over 60s, they can apply now for $1,000, whatever the figure may be. That's the precedent that we're setting right here. That's what concerns me.
Just a point of clarification, anyone can apply for any of our things. There's no restriction on people applying. Whether it gets accepted or not is up to the councillors in here. So it's open to anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Kidd. That is also my understanding. Councillor Hamling.
I'm not against of women's sport, men's sport, over 50 sport, whoever sport, but I do know that other codes promote their women's sport very well, haven't been here asking for money. I'd have a problem with that. Any of that $1,000 was going in his pocket, I'd have a problem with. So I just want clarification. I'm quite happy to pay. If it's for paying for steak sandwiches and drinks and medical people and whatever else, I'm quite happy to do that, don't get me wrong. But I just think be a bit careful here, I think.
Councillor Munro?
Why don't we approve the money subject to that exact that money goes towards the sport and not towards an individual. I think that'd be the only real way of delivering to both sides of the debate. I'd like to move that if acceptable.
So it'd be going to the Orange Waratah Soccer Football Club. That's who the donation would go to.
For a specific reason to help the club.
So do you want to defer it seeking more information from the club, or do you want to...
I think as long as the money doesn't go into the pocket of the person coming from Sydney, if it goes to the club to help them put the event on, whatever, as long as it doesn't go to a personal payment. The club surely could use it for holding the event in other ways.
Why don't you delegate it? And we'll
that'd be fine.
Going straight into the pocket of the individual.
That way. That'd be good.
You happy with that, Councillor Munro? So we'll stay with the original motion with the addition that the General Manager will follow up where the costs are being allocated to. Or better wording from the General Manager?
Determined by the General Manager. Donation of 1,000 be determined by the General Manager. Orange Waratah Soccer Football Club.
Now, that wouldn't set a precedent, would it, that they can go straight to the General Manager for future donations, because it would still require it all to come through us.
Each application is treated on its merits.
So let's put that item 3 with that addition. Do we want the motion read? In favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. That concludes the Finance Policy Committee meeting, with the time being 10:21. I call on Councillor Nugent to conduct the Services Policy Committee.
Thanks, Councillor McRae. I open the Services Policy Committee at 10:21, 22. And firstly, ask if there are any declarations of interest. Does any councillor have any pecuniary interest, significant non-pecuniary interest, or less than significant non-pecuniary interest in any matter listed for consideration at this meeting? If not, we'll move along to section 2, item 2.1.
I'll move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3.
Orange Health Liaison Community Committee meetings, moved by Councillor Kidd, seconded by Councillor Munro. Any discussions in relation? Councillor Taylor.
I'd like to move on item 4 on those recommendations, and that is that Council make provision in the 2019-20 budget for CCTV throughout Robertson Park.
You're on the health.
Oh, sorry, you're on the. Sorry, you're on the. Yeah. Sorry, I've got the wrong one.
Okay. All right. Anyone wanting to comment or discuss or ask any questions in relation to the Orange Health Liaison Community Committee? Otherwise, we'll move the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Motion is carried. Thank you for that. We'll move on to item 2.2.
I'll move the 3 plus the
Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move item 4, which was the Council included in the 2019-20 budget provision for CCTV in Robertson Park.
So I think it was moved by Councillor Kidd.
I'm not worried about who moves it or whatever. I'm just...
Councillor Kidd, seconded by Councillor Taylor.
Get it on the agenda. Mr. Chairman, we heard here only a few weeks ago about all the problems that exist in the park there. I tried for many years as the chairman of the committee, for 15 years, to get CCTV in the park there. We managed to get CCTV throughout the CBD, but we never quite got to making provision for it in Robertson Park. Obviously, if it's been highlighted recently, there's a number of antisocial issues there. There's obviously a significant amount of crime that must be happening in the park there. So the best way to address that is to give police what I believe is a very, very effective tool as far as apprehending any people who might want to perpetrate crimes in that park. It shouldn't come. Imagine the cost of CCTV has come down significantly in recent years with the advent of digital technology, so I don't think it would be a cost preventative thing. And I think it goes towards, it's a positive move. It goes towards addressing problems as far as any problems, whether they be real or perceived, as far as the park is concerned. That way.
Thanks, Councillor.
I support the motion.
I do note that we're in the budget process right now, budget planning process for 2019-2020. And I suppose I'd like to ask the General Manager whether this motion preempts some process that's already underway.
We need to. We can certainly work up.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Munro.
Look, everything to do with Robinson Park and security, I'd like to thank the lady police officers with the PCYC that have had their van intermittently in Robinson Park. I noticed the van there the other week, and I called in and had a yarn, and they told me about the things they're trying to do with youth and encouraging young people to come and have a little bit of a chat and talk about things might be worrying them, use their van and the facility they had. I'd like to try and encourage that more often. I think I'd like to see if we could send thank you or something to the PCYC for implementing that. I think it's important, and a police presence there for other reasons is wonderful as well. But during the holidays, they had the van there. They had they looked after it, and they had a few kids come and have a good chat, and that's what it's all about. I think PCYC do a wonderful job, and I'd like to give them a letter of encouragement, please, from Council. Continue those sorts of things, maybe Fridays, weekends, whenever they think's relevant.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor Munro. So you're proposing that a letter be sent?
I'd like to, just acknowledge the fact that they're there and encourage them to maintain a presence there.
Just to get those two councillors' attention over there.
Sorry?
I want to get those two councillors to listen to what I've got to say.
So okay with...
But you know.
Okay.
So Duffy. There are when we're talking about CCTVs, there's such thing as mobile cameras and all these type of things around, and you've got applications now on phones and all these type of things we can follow. Where are we at to with all that type of stuff? Are we into that as well? What's going on there? And I'm led to believe that we have a mobile camera. We haven't been using it.
I'll ask Mr. Morton.
That's
How for?
That's true, Council. We took delivery of it at the end of last year. Mobile CC. Guiding the to comply with the regulations that we quite onerous, which came out of the Shoalhaven case 5 years ago now. So that we could continue. And that's by post. Actual deployment.
My question is looking at what I mean with technology now. I think there should be a lot of better things than running around with a trailer with a massive big solar panel on the back and hanging it up on a tree. I think there'd be better ways to do that. Is there better ways, or can we research that?
That's the advice we've received from relations of data privacy, transmission, night vision. That's the advice we've got on the have it around our street system.
Thanks. Can we have some advice on that as regards to the technology that's available? Where can we use it?
Chair,
on notice.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
I'd just like to commend Councillor Taylor on that. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think any way that we can place some CCTV around where there may be some troubled hotspots and help the police is fantastic. I just want a question. Is there is funding available for CCTV out in the government land somewhere? I think we should probably.
So, I think is the response.
We've had 3 successful grant applications. The latest one was last year. That was announced, and that was a joint lighting grant. It was about 400. And last year we implemented the upgrade of the CCTV system.
Throw another grant application together then?
The next time they're available.
Yeah.
They do come up under community safety.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hamling. Any other speakers? Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the full motion, the four-point motion, say aye. Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, and I'd like to. Yes, that's it for the Services Policy Committee, which concludes at 10:32, and I'd like to hand back to the Mayor to recommence the ordinary meeting of Council.
Item 4 is notice of motion and their notice of rescission, none at this stage. 5 is general reports. Point 1 is of investments, November 2018.
Second.
Who moved it? All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you.
Move it.
5.2, we have a move in Councillor Duffy, a second in Councillor Romano, I think, was it?
Oh.
Sorry. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. 5.3
Move the motion.
is the strategic policy review. So the mover was Councillor Nugent, the seconder was Councillor Munro. All in favour?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a comment on this. I've said in this chamber before, and I asked for of our policy committees to see what their policies were. Individual basis, set up a committee and go through that way. But the staff didn't take it that way. We had a presentation by, I think, a former staff member, Michelle Catlin. There's a lot of things in our policies that need adjusting. They're out of date. You look at the expense policies, you're looking at some of these policies here, they're out of date and they need doing. So I'm going to put a resolution forward to the next council that we form a committee to review these policies. One by one, I don't care how long it takes us, but at least we'll have an understanding of what they are about, but not turf them out because we need to know why they are there in the first place. So I think they're just up for review. I think they're bad or good.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. All in favour? Against? Thank you. We now move into closed. 6. The General Manager will advise the Council if any written submissions have been received relating to any item advertised for consideration by a closed meeting of Orange City Council.
There's no submissions we're aware of.
Right. I extend an invitation to any member of the public present at the meeting to make a representation to council as to whether the meeting should be closed for a item. Councillors, just remind everyone to stay in the room. We're moving into closed here. The door's closed, you can't come back in. All right. Well, the door will be closed. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation of 2005, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business of a kind as referred in section NA in brackets 2 of the Act and should be dealt with in a confidential session of the council meeting closed to the press. Items to be considered in closed, 6.1, 6.2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. The reason for confidentiality, the item is classified confidential under the provisions of section 10A, brackets 2, bracket C, information that would, if disclosed, confer a commercial advantage on a person whom the council is conducting or proposes to conduct business. Just check that the live streaming off. Just wait a second for council. Someone.